To celebrate the festivities, there's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag will get it all to you in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight
and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. It's 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next few hours, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. On today's show, with just 3 days to go before Rachel Reeves delivers her maiden budget as Chancellor, we'll be discussing the news that over 1,600 businesses have shut up shop ahead of the anticipated rise in capital gains tax. Then in Worldview, we will cross live to the United States to speak to podcaster Justin Young, as reports emerge that over half of the current cabinet wanted to ban Donald Trump from addressing the UK Parliament during any state visit. Then, of course, in the Great British Debate, I'm asking, would you trust Gen Z to defend the nation? This comes as it's revealed soldiers under the age of 27 are demanding double beds, ensuite toilets, and better Wi-Fi if they're to stay in the army. And in my interview, joining me, historian Martin Whittock for an in-depth discussion on the case for and against slavery reparations. But before all of that, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Nana. These are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has failed to clarify what Labour mean by working people, while thousands of businesses are closing their doors due to fears about Labour's upcoming budget. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer denied misleading the public after promising not to raise taxes on working people in the run-up to the general election. Speaking earlier on GB News, Bridget Phillipson avoided questions around whether people running small firms are working people.
I appreciate that it's frustrating that I can't comment on wider measures in the budget, but we haven't got long to wait. The Chancellor will set out everything on Wednesday. What our manifesto was clear about was that we didn't want working people to face higher taxes. We hold to that, and they will not see increases in VAT and national insurance or in income tax. And coming out of the budget, when they receive their payslip, they will not see higher taxes.
The US has said Israel's strikes on Iran should be the end of direct conflict between the two countries. Speaking after yesterday's attacks, the White House said Israel was acting in what they described as self-defense, but added they are fully prepared to defend Israel should Iran choose to respond. It comes as Iran's president has warned against further attacks on his country. Meanwhile, at least 35 people have been injured, 6 reportedly seriously, after a truck hit a bus stop in central Israel this morning. Israeli police say the suspected ramming attack north of Tel Aviv is being treated as a possible terror incident. Police have confirmed the driver of the bus was an Israeli citizen. Some tragic news to bring you now. Following a fatal road collision in the early hours of Saturday morning, a 39-year-old Craig Nunn has been charged with causing death by dangerous driving. A 3-week-old baby died following the crash in Stockport, Greater Manchester, whilst a man and woman also in the vehicle were treated in hospital for their injuries. A man has been charged with attempted murder after a woman and 2 children suffered stab wounds in what has been described by police as a truly shocking incident. Police were called to Dagenham, where they found the woman in her 30s, an 8-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, all suffering from stab wounds. The Metropolitan Police said they were taken to hospital and none are in a life-threatening condition. 48-year-old Kulvinder Ram will appear in court on Monday, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. Police said those involved were all known to each other. A man has died after boats carrying migrants deflated in the English Channel on Sunday morning, French authorities have said. It comes after GB News revealed the number of Channel migrants arriving in the UK so far this year has already overtaken the whole total for 2023. The total figure for small boats migrants over the whole of that year was 29,437. Prince William has extended what is being called an olive branch to Prince Harry by publicly naming him for the first time in 6 years.
My mother took me to the Passage. She took Harry and I both there. I must have been about 11, I think, probably at the time, maybe 10. I'd never been to anything like that before, and I was a bit anxious as to what to expect.
That's part of a new ITV documentary following the Prince of Wales and his first year of his Homewards programme that aims to end homelessness. The film, titled Prince William, We Can End Homelessness, includes poignant unseen photos of William and Diana at the Passage in Westminster. Over to the US now, and Michelle Obama has used her first appearance on the campaign trail alongside VP Kamala Harris to attack Donald Trump. The former First Lady urged Americans to cast their votes to protect the country from the dangers of Donald Trump. Speaking to a crowd of thousands, Obama focused on a genuine fear of how Trump administration could impact abortion rights.
I want to think about who do you think possibly would care more about our reproductive health. And we are more than just baby-making vessels. You get to choose. You get to use your judgment and cast your vote for yourself and the women in your life. Remember, women, standing up for what is best for us.
Those are your latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. Now, before we get stuck into the debates, here's what else is coming up today. The top story, thousands of businesses are already shutting up shop. Yes, they are. As Rachel Reeves prepares to hike capital gains tax in this week's budget. Yes, Wednesday. Hopefully it won't be a Black Wednesday. We'll have a reaction to that throughout the show. All of this as rumours continue to circulate about what the budget will actually contain. And we have the following poll asking you that question now. Do you trust Rachel Reeves not to do a Liz Truss? Make sure you cast that vote. Love to hear your thoughts. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are mixed sports the way forward? In World View, we'll be crossing over live to the US as reports that over half of the current cabinet wanted to ban Donald Trump from ever addressing the UK Parliament. Stay with me, we'll be discussing that and more coming up. As ever, send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/yourself. So, with Rachel Reeves' maiden voyage, her budget as Chancellor just 3 days away, rumours and speculation continue to swirl about what it will contain, and amid fears that the Chancellor will hike capital gains tax in an attempt to raise £40 billion. That's quite a lot, right? But thousands of business owners are already closing their doors. That's according to the latest figures. More than 1,600 company directors have chosen to wind down their businesses so far this month, which is by far the highest number of closures this year and more than double the amount for the whole of last October. So with that in mind, can the upcoming budget really be called pro-growth? Well, joining me to discuss, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Nigel, very good to have you on board. Nigel, people are running to the hills before this thing has even got going. And I know Rachel Reeves, she's made loads of comments about how Liz Truss had crashed the economy, and this leaking of little bits and pieces is trying to avoid that. But do you think that we might see a Liz Truss situation on Wednesday?
No, because the big difference between this budget and Liz Truss's budget is you'll have the Office of Budget Responsibility report to go alongside it. So that will tell you whether or not these measures are actually working, exactly what the effects will be. That's what Liz Truss didn't do. She didn't have the OBR report, and that's what spooked the markets.
Yeah, but with the report, perhaps the fact that businesses are being spooked even before the budget, and that's because they're anticipating hikes in capital gains taxes and things like that. And of course, the announcement of the potential rise in employers' national insurance. These things, alongside whatever Rachel is about to announce, could have the same effect.
Well, I mean, again, it depends on how she does it. Now, if you just take the national insurance rise, one of the things that's being mooted is that 1 million small businesses will get a rise in their allowance for national insurance. So the way the system works is if a small business is paying under £100,000 in national insurance, they get a £5,000 allowance. It's like a sort of an employer's personal tax allowance. What she could do is increase that to £6,000. That would cost £1 billion to do, but that would ease the pain for them. Big businesses, yes, will be facing increases of somewhere in the region of £600 an employee.
That's quite a bit, though, isn't it? And there'll be some in between who probably won't be able to afford that. So that doesn't sound to me like it's pro-growth, though. Does that sound like pro-growth to you?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is the money's got to come from somewhere. So she's looking to raise somewhere in the region of £40 billion, both from tax rises and spending cuts. Now, a lot of that's going to come from tax rises. It just depends who gets hit. So anybody who's about to face a tax rise squeals about it. No one wants to pay more tax. But what she's trying to do is hit the people who can most afford it. What we'll know at the end of Wednesday is whether she's actually achieved that.
Well, we're all getting a bit concerned about this. I mean, she's frozen the threshold for income tax, which naturally, with fiscal drag, ensures that others who've got their raised salaries will end up in higher brackets. So that is in a sense, a tax rise, is it not?
Yes, it is. And we don't know this is actually going to happen yet, but certainly there's been a lot of speculation around this. So what she's talking about at the moment is that the income tax thresholds are frozen until 2028. And there's a suggestion that it will go beyond that. The idea is to raise another £7 billion. Now, as I say, that is not confirmed as yet. We'd have to wait till Wednesday to see if that happens. But yes, I mean, that will cause pain for anybody who finds that they get a pay rise and then end up in a higher tax bracket as a result of that.
And how much confidence do you have in Rachel Reeves, considering that she had the parliamentary's credit card suspended because she had £4,000 worth of unauthorised transactions? Do you have any confidence? And rumour has it that when she was at the Bank of England, those who worked around her said that she was useless.
Well, I mean, there have been a lot of reports like that. Again, that's bound to happen. She's the Chancellor, her budget's coming up. People are looking for all sorts of things to actually smear her with. But I think that if you're asking me about the confidence in her and this budget, yes, I have. But what she's trying to do is lay the foundations for the change that Keir Starmer was promising. What it is going to mean is some short-term pain. And the question obviously comes whether we'll get some long-term gain from that. But her plan at the moment is to wipe away the mess the Tories left so she can get on with running the economy properly. That means this budget's going to be tougher than one hopes subsequent budgets will be.
They've got themselves in a bit of a mess, though, with working persons. I mean, Nigel, what would you say a working person is?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think they have got themselves in a huge mess over this. I mean, broadly, what they're trying not to use is the word working class. So Labour's core supporters, ever since Labour was created, was the urban working class. So that was what we used to call blue-collar workers as opposed to the white-collar workers. We don't use terms like that anymore. So they replaced it with working people. And of course, we're all working people. That's what we do. So I think that the key here, I think Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, got nearest to it this morning. The people who won't get tax rises are those who earn their income from a pay slip. Anybody else who doesn't, who's got assets, will face tax rises. So I think that we have to not worry too much about the definition of working people, but it is people like you and me who get a pay slip every month.
So yeah, but I have an asset as well. So I'm a split working person, Nigel.
Me too.
Nigel Nelson, thank you very much. A pleasure as ever. That is GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. So, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. It's just gone 3:15. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Welcome. Coming up, are mixed sports the way forward? That's the view of sports broadcaster Claire Balding, who predicts that more and more Olympic sports will have men and women competing on the same team and competing against each other. Is that utter madness? Next, though, the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you have faith in Rachel Reeves not to do a Liz Truss? This is GB News.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man, I mean, he really was big, was snapped trying to fit into his seat on the plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome. It's just coming up to 19 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments. Post them at gbnews.com/yoursay. We will be going through those throughout the show, but we're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's time for our first Great British Debate of this hour. And I'm asking, do you have faith in Rachel Reeves not to do a Liz Truss? Now, in order to try and raise £40 billion, Rachel Reeves is reportedly planning to raise capital gains tax in her up-and-coming budget on Wednesday. However, the very fear of that has already led 1,600 company directors deciding to wind down their businesses this month alone, with fears that more could follow suit if the Chancellor does indeed raise capital gains tax. In the meantime, there are also fears that as many as 6,000 millionaires could flee Britain for the European Union by the end of December. That's ahead of the anticipated tax rises in Wednesday's budget, with Italy one of their prime destinations due to its flat rate of tax. Experts have therefore expressed concerns that both of these factors could have a devastating impact on the economy and could end up with a situation a bit like what happened with Liz Truss. Although Liz had the right idea, it was just executed with Neolithic incompetence. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you have faith in Rachel Reeves not to do a Liz Truss? Joining me now, my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, also former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, I will start with you. Liz Truss I thought her ideas were right, but unfortunately she didn't get the OBR behind her and all these other things that she should have done. Rachel Reeves appears to be doing it in the right way around, but my concern is the content. Are you concerned at all with any of the content?
I'm not concerned with the content. I think that the plans to bring to the budget on Wednesday have been carefully thought out over this 10-week period by all sorts of people. That's all fair and what you would expect to do. And that's one of the huge differences from what happened with Liz Truss. So I think comparing Rachel to Liz Truss is not on, in my view.
Well, no, but I'm talking about the effect.
Yes.
So not necessarily, as I said earlier, it's not necessarily the actual the contents for Liz Truss, because I believe she had the right content, but it wasn't executed well. This is the other way around. The content, to me, is very cack-handed, but she may be doing all the right things or doing the right sound bites.
But we don't know all the details.
Well, we know some of it.
This is well,
that's part of how she's doing it, rather than...
There's been a lot of content from all various media areas. And so we don't actually know what will be in Wednesday's budget. And I can recall my own time in Westminster of some of this gets very much to the line In other words, this will still be going on Tuesday as they take their way through towards Wednesday. This is not something that all the areas that everyone has commented on already will necessarily be in the budget. You can't be sure of that at this point on Sunday afternoon. We'll be a lot better off in 3 days' time.
Well, we might be a lot worse off, and people have got the frighteners up them already. Danny Kelly.
We'll have to find out on Thursday or Friday to see if she does a Liz Truss. I'm going to caveat everything just like I ever did. We're going to have to wait till Wednesday. But some of the media reports, and lots of stuff is leaked to the press. We mustn't be naive to that, just to see how we react, never mind how the markets react, just to see how the great British public react. Being in the car game, I'm a businessman away from broadcasting, and I can tell you that...
No.
Not that I would...
No.
Either.
You don't have a car business, do you?
Never. Not that I ever mentioned it either.
Never had a guest.
I've just met Ivor for the first time. Every day's a school day. And I can tell you the market has quietened down because a car, unless your car has just blown up, for example, smoke coming out of the engine, fire coming out of the exhaust, a car is not an essential purchase. No. So people put essential purchases on the back burner, and the used car game is slowing down. Now, as someone who, has to pay national insurance, there'll be lots of businesses out there. If they do have to pay 2% more national insurance for their employees, well, believe it or not, that's the 2% towards next year's pay hike for those employees potentially out the window. Because businesses can't just subsidise everything. If there's a 2% national insurance hike, then that 2% has to come from elsewhere, because a lot of businesses, unless they're multi-billion-pound conglomerates, they just can't survive that sort of big hike.
But if you are a big business, that impact will be even greater because you'll have more employees, so therefore the amount that you're paying will be considerably higher. Yeah.
I mean, with any situation like this involving government, you're always going to be in this situation of everyone wants their bit of it. And you can't always account for that. And I think when Rachel stands up on Wednesday, I think there will be a lot of happier people hearing what is said. And I think that's really important, not just for the Labour Party.
I don't know about
I think that's just important generally for the country. Sorry.
But the effect already, so even though we don't know exactly what is in it, but they've been leaking things deliberately to soften the blow so it doesn't end up like a bit of a shock, which is what happened in the case of Liz Truss.
But there are times when people make decisions not to do something. And, that's happened. I can remember those times as a minister.
Like what? What do you mean?
Well, where, for instance, I would have been dealing with stuff on Defence Minister stuff. I wanted more money for this or that, and I couldn't get it. So all of those things you put into the budget, hoping you will get what you're asking for as a minister, but it can't all happen. It just can't happen. It couldn't happen then, and I doubt it can all happen now. And that's just where we are.
I can't see... Sorry, forgive me, Nana.
Well, I just wanted to finish off. But the issue is the effect that even the leaked stuff is having. So it's all very well said, but the things that are being leaked are having a negative impact already.
I was going to say, just pick up on one of Ivor's points, where Ivor reckoned that, come Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning, more people are going to feel happy. I can't see that more people, the majority of people who pay taxes, are going to feel happier. I genuinely can't. Again, going back to my life away from broadcasting, when I do speak to people, you should never bring in politics when you're trying to do a business deal. But sometimes...
No, don't do that.
Never do that. 2 or 3 things you shouldn't do, and politics is one of them. But a lot of people are feeling really, almost with buyer's remorse. Sometimes I sell a car to someone and you can see in a month's time, Dan, I want a part exchange and I don't like. That's buyer's remorse. A lot of Labour voters have got buyer's remorse.
Well, even Amy Nicole-Turner, who's extremely left-wing, she today didn't seem very sort of enthused by the Labour Party's budget either. So, I think, unfortunately, what they've done is they've literally hit everybody. It's like one of those triffids. Remember those triffids, those plants that had a tongue that just went... and if you got in the way of the tongue... You don't remember the triffids?
No, I don't.
Do you remember the triffids? No. Do you not remember the triffids?
I was vaguely remembering this.
So this budget is like a triffid, one of those weird giant plants with this massive tongue that comes out and just smacks everybody. So everybody's been slapped in the face, and everyone's like, what? Is there anybody left that they haven't slapped in the face?
No, one of your earlier points was that 1,600 businesses have folded this month.
Deliberately.
Well, that's speculative. Unless they've gone and asked each company director why they've folded.
Well, they've done proper, this is a proper research that's been done to show, and it's more than...
Correct. I read the article, and they're basing it on the fact that this time last year, 800 businesses folded. This time this year, 1,600.
Yeah.
So it's speculative unless they've asked each and every company owner, why have you... Do you realise how big a thing it is to fold a business? Decisions like that are not taken lightly.
They're not taken lightly. But
so if the article's right... and 1,600 people have folded their business, although I would dispute that. But let's just say another 800 have, because it's 800 more than last year. Then 800 people, men and women, have taken that decision to fold your business. That's massive. That just shows how frightened people are.
Well, that's right. And obviously we're losing potentially a load of millionaires. Now, Dale Vince said, oh, so who cares, so what? But it does matter. It does make a difference, because if we lose, they pay 60% of the tax. So these businesses, you don't want to lose your millionaires and your wealth creators.
Absolutely not. I mean, that's not what people want to see done at any circumstance. I mean, I think we would expect most people in that situation to want to stay in the United Kingdom. Why not? I would really say let's wait and see about this. I know I've been saying that consistently for the best part of 3 weeks with various GB News appearances. But I have to be serious and just say we can't just determine what will happen ultimately until we get to Wednesday afternoon.
But listen, if you're not even prepared to wait and see, then it should tell you something. The people aren't even prepared to wait and see because they've seen enough.
Well, I'm not sure what they have seen.
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen. What is that?
It's one of the big differences between, if I can, between what happened in 97. The instant thing in 97 was we started the work on Scotland and Wales becoming more independent. And so this big issue was carried on in the starting point, and the budget was much earlier than the one we're having now. So all of these things are very different to the one that we would have experienced as a Labour Party in 1997, but that doesn't make it wrong. And I think that on Wednesday afternoon, there will be an opportunity for Labour to actually start the process of saying to people, we're going to get this right.
May I ask Ivor a question? Do you think Tony Blair would have been like Keir Starmer? Because Tony Blair was a master of manipulating the media. And at the age of, when did he come into power? 1997. And Tony Blair was a successful Prime Minister. He did a number of things that a lot of people still to this day can't forgive him for. But generally speaking, he was a successful, popular Prime Minister. Do you think Keir Starmer can ever duplicate that Tony Blair aura almost?
They're very different beasts, if I can say that. I've always said about Tony Blair that there will never be another Blair. And I stand by that.
Thank God.
I think Keir needs to be himself and to bring that forward. And I hope from Wednesday that not just Rachel, but Keir as well, can come out of this and start to show the actual change that he wants.
You see, Blair had charisma and Blair had charm. You can love or hate... I nearly called him Donald Trump. I'm talking about our former Prime Minister, of course. Boris Johnson, thank you. His name escaped me. Love or hate him, you can't deny he had charisma. Now, Blair had bucket loads of charisma, and that went some way into almost some people forgiving him for certain things. Not everyone. I think Keir Starmer is devoid of charisma, and charisma is important in politics.
I think it is, and I will probably agree with you there, and even Ivor Kaplan may well agree with that as well.
I agree, actually, with what's just been said, because
devoid of charisma.
That's right. Charisma is important.
And
yes, Tony Blair has it, and I think Keir can bring himself out much more in the future.
I think that's him.
He needs time.
I think that's him. That's him. Time? How long? No. People are, pensioners aren't going to get their winter fuel allowance. No, I can't give them any more time. But we have 4.5 years of them at least. But you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online, and on digital radio. Coming up in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are mixed sports the way forward? But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Nana. It's just after 3:30, and these are your latest GB News headlines. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has failed to clarify what Labour mean by working people, while thousands of businesses are closing their doors due to fears about Labour's upcoming budget. The Telegraph is reporting that more than 1,600 company directors have chosen to wind down their businesses so far this month, the highest number of closures this year and more than double the amounts for the whole of last October. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer denied misleading the public after promising not to raise taxes on working people in the run-up to the general election. Some tragic news, and following a fatal road collision in the early hours of Saturday morning, a 39-year-old Craig Nunn has been charged with causing death by dangerous driving. A 3-week-old baby died following the crash in Stockport, Greater Manchester, whilst a man and woman also in the vehicle were treated in hospital for their injuries. A man has been charged with attempted murder after a woman and 2 children suffered with stab wounds in what has been described by police as a truly shocking incident. Police were called to Dagenham, where they found the woman in her 30s, an 8-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, all suffering from stab wounds. The Metropolitan Police said they were taken to hospital and none are in a life-threatening condition. 48-year-old Kulvinder Ram will appear in court on Monday, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. Police said those involved were all known to each other. Prince William has extended what is being called an olive branch to Prince Harry by publicly naming him for the first time in 6 years.
My mother took me to the passage. She took Harry and I both there. I must have been about 11, I think, probably at the time, maybe 10. I'd never been to anything like that before, and I was a bit anxious as to what to expect.
That's part of a new ITV documentary following the Prince of Wales and the first year of his Homewards programme that ends to aim homelessness. The film, titled Prince William, Can We End Homelessness?, includes poignant unseen photos of William and Diana at the Passage in Westminster. In other royal news, the King is set to return to full royal duties next year, including an overseas tour, despite his ongoing cancer treatment. A palace official described his trip to Australia and Samoa as a perfect tonic, adding it's lifted his spirits. King Charles will fly abroad during the spring and autumn, the traditional periods for official foreign royal trips, provided doctors sanction the travel. And as the clocks have gone backwards, so did the London Eye for only the 2nd time in its history to mark the end of British summertime. The London landmark usually runs clockwise, but this morning it ran anti-clockwise for around 30 minutes from 8:15 a.m. before it opened to the public. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be wet and windy in the northwest today, brighter elsewhere before turning cloudier for all of us on Monday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got a ridge of higher pressure extending across the south of the UK, but the next frontal system coming in from the northwest, affecting much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. So a damp end to the day here with outbreaks of rain. That will gradually sink its way south and eastwards, could turn heavy at times across parts of Cumbria. Towards the far southeast, probably holding on to the driest conditions as we go to start Monday morning. But otherwise, a lot of cloud around. That will help keep the temperatures up, so not quite as chilly out there to start Monday as Sunday morning, lows 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Monday, well, it is going to be a dull start out there for most of us, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. In any sheltered spots further towards the east, though, we may get away with some brighter spells to start the day across parts of Scotland. Otherwise, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle across Northern Ireland, mild here. May be seeing more persistent rain across the hills across Wales, with the southwest seeing some sunshine to start Monday morning. But otherwise, not much changes throughout the day. It is going to be a dull day out there with a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle on and off. There may be some breaks in the cloud, especially towards eastern areas and towards the far southeast as we go into the afternoon. And here we'll see temperatures rising, perhaps up to 16, possibly 17 degrees. Otherwise, staying up at around 14 or 15 degrees towards the north. So as we go through Monday evening and overnight, again, a very similar picture out there. A lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle, maybe seeing drier conditions towards the far southeast. And then higher pressure dominates Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. But once again, it won't be blue skies. There'll still be a lot of cloud around. Bye-bye.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app, and it's totally free. Check out everything on the channel. But it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, are mixed sports the way forward? Speaking in an interview with the Times newspaper, broadcaster Claire Balding has claimed that the future of sport is mixed, with men and women competing on the same team in many Olympic sports. Pointing to Team GB's success in the sports such as the mixed triathlon, the Paris Olympics, she added that the viewers would much rather see male and female athletes participate together than divided out for funding, fans and airtime. However, with many female athletes complaining about having to compete against biological men in the past, such a move would be surely controversial. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I thought I'd chuck this one in there. Are mixed sports the way forward? Well, joining me, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Danny Kelly, why is she saying this?
I notice you've come to the unfittest person on the panel to talk about elite sport, Mr. Queer. I think I don't know what motivates her to speak about this. It could be an ideological position. I think it's an awful idea. I was talking to Ivor about his beloved Brighton Hove Albion. I'm an Everton fan. Yeah. If Brighton and Hove Albion, the blokes played Brighton and Hove Albion women's, it'd be a cricket school, vice versa. Yeah. There's nobody in Brighton and Hove Albion...
mixed up, though, with girls and men...
Well, then highly skilled and more skillful men would be losing out because of some sort of box-ticking exercise.
Yeah. What do you think, Ivor?
I think, I mean, actually, I don't agree. I agree with what Danny's just said, but I think what Claire was saying there was more around some of the Olympic areas, that there could be more approach. I think when in Paris there was one or two where they were quite close to each other. And I don't mean happening together, but they were sort of one after another because there was problems with the seawater, wasn't there, in France during that because of the rain, and all those sort of things were happening. So I don't know if that was what generated that, but I absolutely know that for football purposes there will be no change, and you know, there will be men and there'll be women, and both of these are very important institutions.
Part of her article, I think she was referring to golf, professional golf, and it's really interesting, but I don't play golf. I don't know if you play golf, you two?
I haven't for a year, so... But
it's my understanding that the women's course, what do you tee off from, Ive? What's that called? Is that just the tee?
It's the tee,
okay.
yeah.
So the tee is a lot closer for women on golf courses. So what that tells you so much. So they're bringing the actual hole a lot closer for a woman who can't hit it as far. Now, if you're going to start mixing men and women playing golf, then that in itself, that is so illustrative of the difference between men and women and their power. We're not talking about skill, because I don't play golf, but I can imagine a woman can as skillfully hit a golf ball as a man. Maybe put some spin on it, maybe spin left, maybe spin right. I'm not disputing that. What I'm talking about is power.
Yeah. I mean, I think, when I play golf, I have to say, I'm relieved to get, just down the first hole. But I wouldn't think that is the best way. I mean, in certain smaller societies, in amateur golf, you do find everyone playing together. And, that women go and tee off on the red tee, which is theirs, and the men will be on a yellow tee. So it's just different.
Yeah. Isn't that consistent, though, with more or less every sport, whether it's an Olympic sport or whether it's something a lot more casual like a round of golf, whether it's the 100-metre breaststroke in the swimming pool or whether it's the 100 metres, the men are always faster. And again, I'm not saying that a female swimmer isn't as skillful as a male swimmer, because I'm sure they are equally as skillful, but it's to do with our genetics, our muscle makeup, our skeleton. And I'd love to know what is encouraging Claire, or what motivates Claire to write an article like this, because I don't think it will ever happen. At the start of the article, at the start of Nana's introduction, she reminded us that Claire Balding thinks that most people would want that. And again, I'd love to know where she did that research, that most people would love to see men and women. And again, forget the football for a second, because you're right, she was highlighting a lot of Olympic stuff. I don't know where she gets it from.
Well, we've had a couple of messages on gbnews.com/your say on lots of the topics that we've been discussing. Arnie Taylor says, make sports the way forward, stop being so woke and leave things as they are. Exactly. Why is this Claire Balding saying that? I'm losing respect for Claire. That's I just find it a bit silly that she would think that. We also talked about Blair. We mentioned him there. David says Blair was a second-hand car dealer. He could give all the talk, but had no idea about finances. Hence why we're in so much debt. Second-hand car dealer. So are you, Danny.
It's the first time I have ever been mentioned in the same sentence as Tony Blair.
I think that's a definite first.
That's right. On the budget, Grumpy Grandad says the only people that won't be affected by the budget are MPs. They won't do anything that affect them. The rest of us are going to get hammered. See, this is the thing. I am concerned about that, because this is not to say there's any odd behaviour going on. But the problem I'm having with this is that they know what they're about to announce. So Rachel Reeves will know what she's about to announce. Those around her will know what she's about to announce. So, not that they would, but you could easily make provisions to make sure you avoid anything that would affect you that you're about to announce.
That's just not how it works, if I may say.
OK, how does it work?
As a minister, you have to put forward what you want in your department to the Treasury. And it's only from there that you then start to work things out. And as I said earlier, some things you get, and some things you don't in a period of time. That same thing will be true.
Does it go to the wire, Ivor?
Yes.
How much will the government be monitoring the feedback, the press, the reaction to these stories leaked, and will it go all the way till maybe Tuesday night at midnight, Wednesday morning? I mean, how much feedback do they actually take into account?
I have certainly been. I'm thinking back to the sort of 4 or 5 budgets that I was in there for one or other reasons, and I can certainly say this will be happening in the last day.
In
the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
All right, and somebody said, how do I tune my car radio into GB News, please? It's quite simple. It's on DAB.
Digital.
DAB.
DAB.
It's on DAB, so if you just go through the little searchy things, it should find it for you. It's all alphabetical, so you'll find us need the G's. Right, next, though, it's time for World View. We'll be discussing reports that over half of the current British cabinet wanted to ban Donald Trump from addressing the UK Parliament during any state visit. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's coming up after this short break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tell us about this film, because it's obviously come from your own experiences
We wanted to create something for the entertainment industry that wasn't just another kind of dull documentary. I mean, some of them are brilliant, they're very informative, but you kind of leave a bit bewildered and a little bit kind of flat. So we thought, I've got a passion for writing and you've obviously got an unbounded knowledge on the subject. Why don't we create a film with a kind of satirical look on eating disorders?
So this came it's been made 20 years after your own...
It is 20 years.
20 years,
practically to the day.
So Samantha, you suffered with OCD and an eating disorder as well?
Yes.
And that's when your mum became a counsellor, is that right?
A little bit later on, I think we spent a bit of time in the system and I realised that it wasn't working for us. So I took it on myself to learn as much as I could about the subject.
I call it a tragedy, probably the wrong word, but
No, it is a tragedy because mental ill health and eating disorders destroy the lives of not only the sufferers but their families as well.
But you've turned that into something so positive and so
It's
inspiring.
amazing, really, that 20 years ago our story was just beginning, and 20 years on, we've done what we've done. But I have to say that very little has changed in the system.
I've heard that.
And I think that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah, so...
That was why we wanted to... I mean, I work with families every day and I see the destruction that eating disorders and other mental illnesses not just bring to the sufferer, but the whole family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really passions me, because obviously 20 years ago we were there. And I just feel that so much more needs to be done. And I think with eating disorders, there is still a lot of misunderstanding around the subject.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon. Just coming up to 49 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. It's time now for Worldview. Well, I'll bring you the latest from what's going on around the world. And today, we're talking about the reports over half the current cabinet wanted to ban Donald Trump from ever addressing the UK Parliament. I mean, what are they thinking? This is ridiculous. You've got somebody who's potentially the leader of the free world and you're talking about banning him. Why? This comes just a week after Donald Trump's campaign team accused the government of illegally conspiring to get Kamala Harris elected by sending activists over to America to campaign for her. Look, I mean, this is not the way to behave, is it? But to discuss this, I'm joined live from Texas by the host of the Politics People podcast, Justin Young. You're not the host of the Politics People podcast, Justin, that's Paul Dudridge. Justin, let's see, where's Justin? He's gone. Where's he gone?
I'm here.
Oh, I can't see you, Justin, that's all. I think we did have a split screen of you. Justin, all right. So what are your thoughts on, first of all, the Labour Party deciding they didn't want Donald Trump banning him, half of them wanting to ban him? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, I mean, considering some of the approval ratings that I've seen from paying a little bit of attention to what's going on across the pond, there hasn't been a lot of room in my brain to do it with the final week of the election coming up here. But it doesn't appear as if the Labour Party's or Keir Starmer's approval ratings have done particularly well since he won that election a few months ago. But what is really fascinating with a report like this is that it shows you how different of a language politically is being spoken, because the Labour Party believes that banning Donald Trump from speaking to Parliament would be a bad thing for Donald Trump. Whereas from my perspective as an American who covers this, there might not be any greater thing that Donald Trump would love to do than to use the justification that he can't speak in front of Parliament to go do a larger rally at some kind of stadium or arena with some of the more insurgent elements of the conservative movement in the UK, Nigel Farage probably chief among them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not even going to work in their favour. It will backfire on them, and people won't be able to understand why they're unable to speak to someone who may have a different perspective to them, which is somewhat childish. What about your thoughts on those Labour activists who came to ask Donald Trump? He felt that they illegally were trying to influence the election.
You know, I think that this was made a bit of a larger issue than it is kind of functionally or tactically in terms of the election. I don't know if the volunteer efforts of certain members of the Labour Party were going to really swing any of the key states here in this particular contest. But what it does highlight for Donald Trump is his key phrase, America first. The way that they got the word out on this, the Trump campaign, was to put out a press release saying the British are coming and they're not going to like it this time either. So this is very much playing into their hands of showing insurgent American populism. And really, if you look at some of what has happened over the last, 10 years, and in Europe, you guys have seen it probably more strikingly compared to the baseline of where you've been, but there is a global realignment where certain elements that used to be thought of as safer votes for more labor-centric or union-centric political organizations, they have drifted more to the cities, and conservative movements have really picked up those voters. So the voter that's sitting in a union hall in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, doesn't know who Keir Starmer is, has no idea who the Labour Party are and what their main issues are. So all they know is that foreign government trying to influence what they have to say, for which time and time again, they have decided to go their own way.
OK, and finally, we've got about a minute left. Who is, at the moment, leading the electoral campaign? Who's leading?
That is the $1 million question, or £1 million question, I would say, since I'm on GB News. Right now, I would say that Donald Trump is closing well. The two things that have been true about these two candidates, regardless of how this ends up, is that the more people have seen of Kamala Harris, this was true in 2019, the less they liked her. And Donald Trump has closed well in terms of polling and with non-traditional voters in both of his previous elections. One he won, one he lost. So whether or not that will be enough to get him over the hump, we will see.
Yes, it will be interesting indeed. Well, listen, Justin, thank you very much. That's Justin Young joining us live from Texas. Very briefly to my panel, Ivor Kaplan and also Danny Kelly. Ivor, briefly your thoughts on the American election. Who's going to win?
I very much hope that Camilla wins, and that we don't have to have any more Trump suggesting that nothing's happened.
Danny Kelly.
I think Donald Trump will win. Whenever you say, I think Donald Trump will win, automatically people assume you're taking a position. And I don't read it too much into that, but I think he will win. And also, whenever someone says, he's a felon, you want a felon to win, it's the best man for the job. Again, I'm a man for meritocracy. And maybe, although he's a convicted whatever, maybe he's the best man.
All right, Danny Kelly, thank you very much. Ivor Kaplan as well. Next, my monologue on Rachel Reeves, her maiden budget as Chancellor of the Exchequer. But now, let's get an update with your weather with Catherine Shaw.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be wet and windy in the northwest today, brighter elsewhere before turning cloudier for all of us on Monday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got a ridge of higher pressure extending across the south of the UK, but the next frontal system coming in from the northwest, affecting much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. So a damp end to the day here with outbreaks of rain. That will gradually sink its way south and eastwards, could turn heavy at times across parts of Cumbria. Towards the far southeast, probably holding on to the driest conditions as we go to start Monday morning. But otherwise, a lot of cloud around. That will help keep the temperatures up. So so not quite as chilly out there to start Monday as Sunday morning, lows 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Monday, well, it is going to be a dull start out there for most of us with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. In any sheltered spots further towards the east, though, we may get away with some brighter spells to start the day across parts of Scotland. Otherwise, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle across Northern Ireland, mild here. May be seeing more persistent rain across the hills, across Wales, with the southwest seeing some sunshine to start Monday morning. But otherwise, not much changes throughout the day. It is going to be a dull day out there with a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle on and off. There may be some breaks in the cloud, especially towards eastern areas and towards the far southeast as we go into the afternoon. And here we'll see temperatures rising, perhaps up to 16, possibly 17 degrees. Otherwise, staying up at around 14 or 15 degrees towards the north. So as we go through Monday evening and overnight, again, a very similar picture out there. A lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle, maybe seeing drier conditions towards the far southeast. And then higher pressure dominates Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. But once again, it won't be blue skies. There'll still be a lot of cloud around. Bye-bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers. Sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents, with a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. You'll get it all in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. It's just coming up to 4 o'clock even. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for the next few hours, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Over here, Ivor. On today's show, with just 3 days to go before Rachel Reeves delivers her maiden budget as Chancellor, we'll be discussing over the news that over 1,600 businesses have shut up shop ahead of the anticipated rise in capital gains tax. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I've got a poll up on X asking you whether you think that she's going to do a Liz Truss. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. Then coming up, I'm asking, would you trust Gen Z to defend the nation? This, of course, comes after it's revealed that soldiers under the age of 27 are demanding double beds, ensuite toilets, better Wi-Fi. That's if they're going to stay in the army. Dear, dear. Then in the interview, joining me, historian Martin Whittock for an in-depth discussion on the case for and against slavery reparations. But before all that, let's get your latest news with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Nana. Let's take a look at your latest GB News headlines. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has failed to clarify what Labour mean by working people, while thousands of businesses are closing their doors due to fears about Labour's upcoming budget. According to the Telegraph newspaper, more than 1,600 company directors have chosen to wind down their businesses so far this month, the highest number of closures this year and more than double the amounts for the whole of last October. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer denied misleading the public after promising not to raise taxes on working people in the run-up to the general election. Speaking earlier on GB News, Bridget Phillipson avoided questions around whether people running small firms are working people.
I appreciate that it's frustrating that I can't comment on wider measures in the budget, but we haven't got long to wait. The Chancellor will set out everything on Wednesday. What our manifesto was clear about was that we didn't want working people to face higher taxes. We hold to that, and they will not see increases in VAT, in national insurance or in income tax. And coming out of the budget, when they receive their payslip, they will not see higher taxes.
The US has said Israel's strikes on Iran should be the end of direct conflict between the two countries. Speaking after yesterday's attacks, the White House said Israel was acting in what they described as self-defense, but added they are fully prepared to defend Israel should Iran choose to respond. It comes as Iran's president has warned against further attacks on his country. Meanwhile, at least 35 people have been injured, 6 reportedly seriously, after a truck hit a bus stop in central Israel this morning. Israeli police say the suspected ramming attack north of Tel Aviv is being treated as a possible terror incident. Police have confirmed the driver of the bus was an Israeli citizen. A man has been charged with attempted murder after a woman and 2 children suffered stab wounds in what has been described by police as a truly shocking incident. Police were called to Dagenham, where they found the woman in her 30s, an 8-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, all suffering from stab wounds. The Metropolitan Police said they were taken to hospital and none are in a life-threatening condition. 48-year-old Kulvinder Ram will appear in court on Monday, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. Police said those involved were all known to each other. A man has died after a boat carrying migrants deflated in the English Channel on Sunday morning, French authorities have said. It comes after GB News reveals the number of Channel migrants arriving in the UK so far this year has already overtaken the 29,437 that crossed over last year. Prince William has extended what's being called an olive branch to Prince Harry by publicly naming him for the first time in 6 years.
My mother took me to the Passage. She took Harry and I both there. There must have been about 11, I think, probably at the time, maybe 10. I'd never been to anything like that before, and I was a bit anxious as to what to expect.
That's part of a new ITV documentary following the Prince of Wales and the first year of his Homewards programme that aims to end homelessness. The film, titled Prince William We Can End Homelessness, includes poignant unseen photos of William and Diana at the Passage in Westminster. In the US, Michelle Obama has used her first appearance on the campaign trail alongside Vice President Kamala Harris to attack Donald Trump. The former First Lady urged Americans to cast their votes to protect the country from the dangers of Donald Trump. Speaking to a crowd of thousands, Obama focused on a genuine fear of how a Trump administration could impact abortion rights.
I want to think about who do you think possibly would care more about our reproductive health. And we are more than just baby-making vessels. You get to choose. You get to use your judgment and cast your vote for yourself and the women in your life. Remember, women, standing up for what is best for us.
And finally, in the world of sport, British tennis #1 Jack Draper has won his second ATP title in the Erstbank Open in Vienna. The 22-year-old won in straight sets against Russian Karen Khachanov to take the victory. Speaking after the match, Draper described the win as a relief, saying, "It got really tight there for a minute, but I stayed solid, I stayed mentally in a good frame, and luckily I was able to come through it when it mattered." Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophie. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Rachel Reeves is paranoid about doing a Liz Truss. After Liz Truss's unnecessary mini-budget 2 years ago, the markets went into meltdown, skyrocketing interest rates, confidence hit rock bottom and Rishi Sunak was shoehorned in to fix the mess. Some argue that Liz had the right idea, but the execution was wrong. Her budget affected the housing market, and the Labour Party have literally gone to town on Liz ever since.
Control. Liz Truss crashed the economy. They made it worse here than in other countries.
Liz Truss has even crashed the pork market. Now that is a disgrace.
2 years ago today, in their clamour to cut taxes for the richest, they crushed the economy, sent mortgages spiralling and put pensions in peril.
Really? But are Labour about to do the same thing, but in slow motion, and before the budget has even been announced? According to reports, thousands of businesses are closing ahead of this week's budget, which many are worried could amount to one of the biggest corporate tax raids of this era. Rachel Reeves, who once had her parliamentary credit card suspended for racking up over £4,000 worth of unauthorised transactions, claimed her budget will grow the economy and attract investment into Britain. But the figures are showing the very opposite appears to be happening. The surge in the number of business owners closing down is over concern that a raid on capital gains tax to raise £40 billion is planned, and more than 1,600 companies have shut shop in anticipation. Tory leadership candidate Robert Jenrick said last night Sir Keir has lied not once but twice by claiming not to have breached his manifesto promises on tax and by insisting that his budget will not be an assault on the heartlands of Middle Britain. Well, we await the finer details with bated breath, but if the current reaction before the budget has been announced is anything to go by, Rachel's fiscal event will be just like Liz's, a car crash, but in slow motion. But before we get stuck into the debates, here's what else is coming up today. For my first Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, Will the budget be a war on the middle of Britain, on middle classes? We'll also be debating whether you would trust Gen Z to defend the nation. And do we take the police for granted? This comes as reports suggest police officers will be particularly hard hit by Labour's plan to freeze income tax thresholds. All of that and more coming up. Send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. Right, but let's get the thoughts of a former Labour MP, Stephen Pound, on my monologue. Stephen Pound, welcome. Stephen, who reminds me of Crichton for some odd reason. But, Stephen, what do you think? We've already got some leaks of some of the things coming out in the budget, and the response to those few leaks that we pretty much probably definitely happening is not good. So do you think...
Well, hang on a second.
Yeah.
We haven't got a clue. I mean, you're a pretty good investigative journalist as well as a presenter. You know that you've got to double source your facts. All we got is flim-flam and piles of speculation at the moment. It's the biggest game in town at the moment. It's guessing what's going to happen on Thursday. Well, we haven't got long to wait. Look, the main thing is that getting run through this like, the name through a stick of Blackpool rock, is that this is going to be a budget to invest for the future. Look at what the problem we got in this country. Our productivity is diabolical. Our sickness rates are appalling. We're underfunding the defence of the nation. We're underfunding the NHS. We're not providing enough money for the police. Everywhere you look, things are going wrong. How do we get the money to fix it? How do we get the money to actually get some value from that? Now, what Liz Truss did, of blessed memory, she decided to cut tax for the wealthy. And that was it. She assumed that somehow there'd be this great entrepreneurial surge and that people would start working extra. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. What we really need to do is to get growth, productivity up, and actually get people off the sick, into work, get our defence forces properly funded, the police funded, and the NHS funded. That needs money. If we're not going to get it from tax, where are we going to get it from?
OK, so, first of all, police, defence, NHS. Well, I don't think the defence is underfunded. I think it's just been badly spent. And the NHS, again, another big black hole that's spending money incredibly badly, Stephen. You know that. And, yeah, the police could do with more money. I would agree with that. But growth, productivity, you're announcing things or things are leaking through and businesses are running for the hills. I mean, this is what we are seeing. Even if maybe they do want growth, which... Maybe they do, but taxing national insurance, increasing employers' national insurance by 2% is not going to encourage growth, is it?
Well, hang on a second. You say employers are running for the hills. Let's actually put this into some perspective. Every day of the week, businesses close down. Every day of the week, businesses open up. If somebody's running a business, they're providing a service. People want to buy that product. If somebody closes down, somebody else will actually provide that service and provide that product. Unless you're saying that some of these companies that are closing down are simply providing something that nobody actually really wanted. I'm sorry, there's always a shift. There's always a churn when it comes to businesses. So this is nothing new about that. But as for the employers' national insurance, this is a tiny thing. It's 0.3% of the total expenditure on that. I think in reality, if we're going to do something about getting this country back to work, getting our health service and our NHS and our defence back on a level footing, I just repeat my question, Nana. Where, if not from here, where will the money come from?
All right, well, I'll tell you, the first thing I would do is cut the civil service. I would reduce that ridiculously over-bloated bureaucratic organisation to much lower levels, and I'm sure I could get billions that way. That would be the first starting point. I would scrap this nonsense of carbon capture, which is just absurd. Storing vast amounts of high-pressure carbon under the seabed next to oil and gas wells. Madness. We'll probably blow up the planet ourselves. I mean, look, there are some very stupid schemes that I think they're setting up. 22 billion, which is equal to the price of the black hole that they're talking about, and we're still offsetting our carbon. I would keep those. I would keep our oil and gas running. Our own, in particular, I'd keep at least one or two. I would have most of our coal mines still running. I would not be importing things from China, steel from China. It just doesn't make any sense.
So what a loss you were to frontline politics. I'm sorry, but look. In reality, civil servants, who are they? They're the police.
Exactly.
They're the Navy. The civil servants.
I'm talking about HMRC. I'm talking about I'm talking about...
HMRC is actually cost-effective. I mean, look, I agree with you. It is. I mean, if every single person working in HMRC actually sees some money come into the state, believe you me, I get my tax demands as much as anybody. Yeah.
But they are bloated, and we know they are. So you asked me a question.
How do we know? Nana, how do we know?
We do know. In fact, politicians...
Where's the data? Where's the empirical evidence?
Even West Streeting would say that. They're all saying it. We know that the numbers are double, literally from COVID. Before COVID...
Sorry, who's saying it?
We need to reduce the numbers.
The evidence? Where's the evidence?
The evidence is there. The evidence is there, Stephen. You know that. We know it's overbloated.
I don't
know
that.
There are too many. Yes, there are.
I don't.
They're all saying it. So, but you asked me what I would do. That's what I would do. You would pump more money into all these different things, and I'm not hearing where the growth will come from. Where will you get the money from to pump into these things?
Well, we've just gone through that. I mean, potentially, hypothetically, we're going to get the money for employers' national insurance contribution, maybe some other areas, I don't know. But all I'm saying at the present time is the money has to come from somewhere. Governments don't have, politicians don't have money. The people have money. The money doesn't belong to a politician. It actually belongs to the people who produce the wealth that actually make this country run. At the moment, this country is not running.
They're scaring them off, aren't they? A lot of them are leaving. Delvin said it's fine, but a lot of them aren't.
There's no evidence. There's no evidence.
There is evidence. We've been reading reports of lots of them leaving this country. There was a report only a couple of weeks ago to say that many of the millionaires are leaving. You know, if you don't accept the evidence that is there, then there really isn't.
Name one millionaire who's leaving the country apart from Charlie Mullins. Name one.
Well, listen, you know, funnily enough, I don't know lots of millionaires. I don't know them personally.
Me neither, which is why I want
my circle. But just because I don't know them doesn't mean it's not happening. That's not really an argument, is it?
Where's the evidence?
I've just told you. I've given you evidence. You're not happy with it. Listen, Stephen, we're going to go in circles, so I'm going to leave it there. I've presented you. I've given you evidence, but you won't accept it. You just feel that you just want something else. And otherwise,
Nana, for the first time, you bottled
it. For the first time, what? Sorry.
You bottled it. For the first time I've ever seen you do that.
Bottled what? You haven't... There is evidence. I pointed to the evidence to you. You've not accepted it, so...
No.
Anyway, I've got to go, Stephen. I've got Elliot Keck. Maybe he can clear your mind.
Respect you. I still respect you.
Yes, Stephen. Thank you very much. Goodbye. That's Stephen Found. Elliot Keck, he joins me. He claims I bottled it simply because I did not give him the specific report that shows that people are leaving this country in their droves, which we already know. So if you wouldn't mind pointing to that.
Yeah, so the Adam Smith Institute just recently found that there's a real exodus of millionaires. It's one of the highest in the whole world in terms of per capita, so the number of people relative to the size of the country. And just to pick you up on the point about the civil service, you're absolutely right. We added 23,000 civil servants in the last year alone, and we're mostly adding policy and communications people. It's one of the largest increases we've had in a long time. So you're absolutely spot on to point out the civil service, I have to say.
Thank you, that's what I thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've been reading the reports that say there are way too many. There's diversity and inclusion, there's all that nonsense.
It's extraordinary.
Net zero, it's an absolute waste of money, it's disgraceful. But so what do you think, Rachel Reeves? Her budget is coming out on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Are people leaving? Are businesses closing? Is this normal? Or is this an unusual thing?
They are. It's not normal, or it shouldn't be normal. And I think that this budget is going to be more terrifying than any Halloween film that any of your viewers are going to be watching over the next few days. I think we can expect on Wednesday to have a whole range of tax hikes. They could include making the price of a pint or a bottle of wine more expensive, price of filling up your tank of petrol more expensive, the price of hiring a member of staff or promoting a member of staff more expensive, the price of selling property or selling shares or investments more expensive, the price of putting money into your pension or taking money out of your pension more expensive. And at the same time, Rachel Reeves will have the conceit and the shamelessness to stand up and say at the dispatch box, we're not raising taxes on working people, and I think that is truly appalling.
See, that's why it's so exhausting, because I'm speaking to Stephen. The evidence is there. I've pointed out that there are already reports that suggest that. He wants a specific report. Now you've pointed out the report. These people are exhausting because it is happening, we know it's happening, and they are in denial.
Yeah, and they tell you
Why
not to believe your own
denial?
eyes. Well, I suppose they're desperately trying to put lipstick on a pig to try and spin this as something not as bad as it is. But listen, we've been told that £40 billion is going to be taken from the British people in the form of tax rises. That's about £1,500 per household. That's going to be absolutely catastrophic. It's going to be austerity for all of us, while at the same time for the for the public sector, it's going to be caviar and champagne.
It's exhausting. Honestly, I feel exhausted after that because I was going in a circle, and I'm like, and then in the end, the insult is, "Oh, yeah, I've never seen you bottle it," and I'm like, this is not bottling it. I'm actually bored of going around in a circle to explain to you that what we can all see, people denying what your eyes are seeing, that the NHS is overbloated, they're spending too much money. You don't put more money in it, you need to reorganise it
absolutely.
to get better value out of it.
And that's what West Streeting said before the election, and now, when it actually comes to it, and they're just going to add Yeah, just pump a load more money into it and hope that eventually it's going to work.
So what should she be doing? What should, in your view, Rachel Reeves be doing?
Well, listen, the biggest problem we have in this country is that the public sector is incredibly unproductive. So over the last 25 years, we've seen a fairly healthy increase in private sector productivity. So the private sector is growing more productive and is growing more efficient. Public sector productivity hasn't increased for 25 years. We've added, I think it's 318 public sector workers a day over the last year, about 120,000 public sector workers in total, despite the fact productivity has gone down by 7.5%. If we just had a public sector that was as productive as it was before COVID, a lot of our issues would be solved.
Well, that's what I said.
So before,
to what they were before COVID.
Before she's putting any more money into, you know, whether it's the railway industry, the NHS, you know, whatever industry it is in the public sector, she should be, you know, requiring that, you know, they work longer hours, they take less sick leave, they reduce their annual leave, they actually get back to the standards that we saw just a few years ago. Ideally, you'd like much better standards than that, but, you know, let's walk before we can run. But unfortunately, that's not what they're doing. They're just going to hand a load more money over, hope that eventually things will get better. And for all of us, we're just going to get poorer.
So, because I would like them to be more accountable as to how they're spending our money.
Absolutely.
If they want to do that, then I want to see what I'm getting for it, because, you know, they're wanting more money for public services. There's a lot of money in public services already, and they're not running very well.
Yeah, and they say they're going to be responsible with the finances, but they are saying yes to every single spending project out there, every fashionable scheme, every pet project, every ask by, you know, whatever minister it is. And the only thing that they've managed to find that they can cut spending on is the winter fuel allowance. And I think, you know, if you're a pensioner and you're seeing them hand billions to every single demand and every single ask, but they're not able to find £1.5 billion to fund the winter fuel allowance, that's where you really look at it and you can just recognise there are some really, really disturbing and distorted political priorities here.
And what about national insurance? Because they were talking about raising it by 2%, but then there was the question that it might just be for private companies and not for the public sector.
Which is, it's extraordinary.
Again,
it's extraordinary.
Absolutely absurd.
Yeah, one rule for us and one rule for them. I mean, it really is extraordinary.
And a lot of people in the public sector have really nice pensions.
Yeah. Incredible pensions that you just do not get access to in the private sector, not even comparable. The average public sector pension is about 75% of final salary. Private sector, it's more like 25%.
Wow.
It's really...
Do you think there's a risk of a Liz Truss effect from this budget?
Well, listen, we've seen gilt yields, so the interest paid on government bonds, government debt, higher than it was ever under Liz Truss. So clearly the markets are looking at this Labour government and thinking we're not really convinced.
Wow, Elliot Keck, thank you very much. I've restored my faith in my own knowledge there. He literally convinced me that actually I was totally wrong. Thank you, Elliot. Really good to speak to you. Well, listen, for more reaction, we've got a lot of reaction. That's Elliot Keck. He's from the head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, will the budget be a war on the middle classes?
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
You could, if you're getting a bit bored later on and you've got some free time, tune in to Friends. Remember that?
It's on somewhere in the world all the time.
Probably one of those
incredible.
Obscure TV channels.
It's a big anniversary today, because apparently today was 30 years ago, was when it first hit the screens.
In 1994. Just before, or just after I was born, 89 me. The show ran for 10 series, becoming one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, and it scored numerous accolades, including 62 Primetime Emmy nominations. Joining us now in the studio to talk everything Friends and the big anniversary is showbiz reporter Steph Tetchy and my friend as well.
Happy Friends anniversary, guys. Yes, today is quite a monumental day for one of the most incredible sitcoms to ever hit our TV screens.
That it's on somewhere in the world.
There's millions of people around the world who are watching reruns, watching either streaming of Friends, and it doesn't get boring for people. I think, you know, 30 years later, just that it's such a simple concept. 6 New Yorkers just following their lives and their friendships. It proved a hit with loads of viewers worldwide.
Casting was superb.
It was so incredible. And the thing is, these were all fresh faces at the time. It wasn't like they picked, like, people who were at the top of the game then. And I think it was such a hit with viewers is because they became our friends as well over the years. But obviously today is played with a bit of poignancy because, you know, there is one friend that is missing. And the creators of the show, Martha Kaufman and David Crane, saying that today is a bit fraught for both the cast because of Matthew Perry's passing. And he was known as one of the funniest friends, as most people would describe him as. And so today is kind of marred with sadness.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
25 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. Now, before the break, we were discussing lots of different topics. Lots of you have been getting in touch. gbnews.com/shall say. I'm going to read some of those out. But it's time now for the Great British Debate. And I'm asking, will the budget be a war on Middle Britain? The Chancellor is preparing to hit employers with a whopping £20 billion increase in NI. Bills are in Wednesday's budget in the announcement. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has denied misleading voters as he pledged during his election campaign not to hit working people with increases to VAT, national insurance and income tax. A lot of uncertainty as well over the definition of working people, which we all find most entertaining. So what do you think? Is this going to hit Middle Britain? Joining me, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Danny Kelly, I'll come to you.
Do I count as a working individual?
Or do you go to the office every day?
I don't go to the office every day.
Do you have the ability to write a cheque at some point if something like the boiler blows up?
Yeah, I do have that ability, but
okay.
I'm self-employed.
You're not a working person then, already you failed.
Is that the test, is it? If you've got a couple of quid...
I'm self-employed too.
Well, hang on. Do you have enough money to write a cheque to, if the boiler breaks?
I don't know.
But
well, yes, I do.
Let's say you
necessary,
do.
Yeah,
so you're not a working person either.
So the test is if you've got about £1,000 in the
Well, no, that's
bank.
what he said. He said it's people who go to work every day earn their living through going to work. So, but then if something happened, you didn't have enough money to write a cheque.
So it's to do with finances then. I go to work every day in the sense that I buy cars, I sell cars. Every quarter, every VAT quarter, there's hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of turnover.
We could argue that your money is made from assets, which are cars, which means that...
Well, in that case, you could argue a guy who sells a Snickers bar and earns 50p on a Snickers bar, that's still an asset then. So a newsagent would be not... Of all the people on the high street who are working men and women, a newsagent would be... So by your test, a guy who sells bags of crisps...
It's not my test. He's made that up to what his definition of working person is.
Has he actually said that? Yes. If you've got an asset and you can...
I don't think if we can find that clip from yesterday. We'll see if we can find it.
I'm in trouble.
We can do it in time,
I genuinely think we've had enough of this.
Well,
let's get to Wednesday and get through the budget.
No, we're not
scaring people either.
No, I don't think. Listen, Stephen, I spoke to Stephen Pound there. Literally, was trying to convince me that the Labour Party, or that we're not spending too much money on certain things and we're not wasting money. And the first thing that I would do if I was Rachel Reeves was actually reduce the civil service back to numbers before COVID to save billions, because there's a lot of money.
Would that save billions, though, would it?
Well, that's exact. I was absolutely right. Elliot Clegg said exactly that we would save billions. So what would you do? What would the first...
Well, I'd like... You mentioned carbon capture. I'd like, or even the settlement for the public sector pay workers. I would have used some emotional leverage if I was Keir Starmer. If you want to stop the strikes, I would have said, as a businessman who negotiates for a living, I would say, look, I'm going to give you X amount, but I need to hold back £1.2 billion because I want to make sure that the pensioners can afford to heat their homes. And then the counter-argument is, yeah, but some of those pensioners are millionaires, and you're never going to get... It's a circular point. You're never going to get away from that. But what he's done, he's just given too much. He's given far too much too early. I would have said, look, let's try and reconcile this, let's settle the strikes, but I'm going to have to give you X amount rather than X amount, otherwise the pensioners are going to freeze to death.
Ivor Kaplan, come on, this is a bit of a mess, isn't it? Admit it.
Well, I know exactly what Danny is saying, and there is consequence to the decisions you make, always, in any part of Westminster. I think on this one, the decision to change the matter for pensioners, I think that will be overcome as new pensioners are come in and there is more money available in that consequence. And we stop this thing of wealthy people needing their £300, and I think that is a proper thing to do.
You could have an opt-out, so if somebody wants to opt out because they don't need the money, because there's an illusion that just because somebody has a big house, they've got plenty of equity. They might have plenty of equity, but cash is a different thing. And, you know, you can't expect somebody who's like in their 80s or 90s to be able to just suddenly sell their house and then move. You know, that's a lot. So I think you could have an opt-out option for that, for people to voluntarily opt out.
In fact, I think under Theresa May, I think that the Tories actually wanted to do that, and then they never did. So, I mean, it's one of those...
Opt-in,
Can I just show you? This is the definition of working person, by the way.
Okay.
So this is what you said it was. Keir Starmer. Here it is.
OK, so for someone who works but gets their income from assets as well, such as shares of property, are they a working person?
Well, they wouldn't come within my definition.
So...
That went well, didn't it? That bit.
I interpret that slightly differently.
There was another one, actually, but that's not quite the right one.
An asset, I would imagine he's referring to maybe a landlord who's got 8 houses and he earns a living from those 8 houses, and if he wants to sell 2 or 3 of those houses, he'll get hammered, rather than a guy selling a Mars bar as an asset. Or a car as an asset.
It depends if you own the business, though, because if you're a shop owner, I don't know whether that qualifies. So
I do own the business.
Exactly. So you're not a working person.
So
you're asset rich, you have assets. There'll be things that you have within your business that are assets that will be taxed.
But then that inhibits me to generate wealth because I'm getting taxed on that car asset.
All right, well, let's try again. Here's another one, working person. Have a listen.
I would define a working person as somebody who goes out and earns their living, usually paid in a sort of monthly cheque. But I think that's obviously very broad, so let me be clear. What I mean, or if you like, who I have in my mind's eye when I make decisions as Prime Minister, are the sorts of working people who go out, work hard, and maybe save a bit of money, but don't have the wherewithal to write a cheque to get out of difficulties if they and their family get into difficulties.
Ivor, does that help?
Ask Danny.
You don't want to say.
I can't really say any more than I've tried to say on GB News over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
it's just been painful to do. Let's get on and actually just have the budget.
All right, well, we will have that budget on Wednesday. Right. I don't know whether we really want that, but what do you think? gbnews.com/your say on the way worldview. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. It's just after 4:30, and these are your latest headlines. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has failed to clarify what Labour means by working people, while thousands of businesses are closing their doors due to fears about Labour's upcoming budget. According to the Telegraph newspaper, more than 1,600 company directors have chosen to wind down their businesses so far this month, the highest number of closures this year and more than double the amount for the whole of last October. This comes as Sir Keir Starmer denied misleading the public after promising not to raise taxes on working people in the run-up to the general election. Following a fatal road collision in the early hours of Saturday morning, a 39-year-old Craig Nunn has been charged with causing death by dangerous driving. A 3-week-old baby died following the crash in Stockport, Greater Manchester, whilst a man and woman also in the vehicle were treated in hospital for their injuries. A man has been charged with attempted murder after a woman and 2 children suffered stab wounds in what has been described by police as a truly shocking incident. Police were called to Dagenham, where they found the woman in her 30s, an 8-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, all suffering from stab wounds. The Metropolitan Police said they were taken to hospital and none are in a life-threatening condition. 48-year-old Kulvinder Ram will appear in court on Monday, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. Prince William has extended what's being called an olive branch to Prince Harry by publicly naming him for the first time in 6 years.
My mother took me to the passage. She took Harry and I both there. There must have been about 11, I think, probably at the time, maybe 10. I'd never been to anything like that before, and I was a bit anxious as to what to expect.
That's part of a new ITV documentary following the Prince of Wales and the first year of his Homewards programme that aims to end homelessness. The film, titled Prince William, We Can End Homelessness, includes poignant unseen photos of William and Diana at the Passage in Westminster. In other royal news, the King is set to return to full royal duties next year, including an overseas tour, despite his ongoing cancer treatment. A palace official described his trip to Australia and Samoa as a perfect tonic, adding it had lifted his spirits. King Charles will fly abroad during the spring and autumn, the traditional periods for official foreign royal trips, provided the doctors sanction the travel. And as the clocks have gone backwards, so did the London Eye for only the second time in its history to mark the end of British summertime. The London landmark usually runs clockwise, but this morning it ran anti-clockwise for around half an hour from 8:15 before it opened to the public. For now, those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be wet and windy in the northwest today, brighter elsewhere before turning cloudier for all of us on Monday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got a ridge of higher pressure extending across the south of the UK, but the next frontal system coming in from the northwest, affecting much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. So a damp end to the day here with outbreaks of rain. That will gradually sink its way south and eastwards, could turn heavy at times across parts of Cumbria. Towards the far southeast, probably holding on to the driest conditions as we go to start Monday morning. But otherwise, a lot of cloud around. That will help keep the temperatures up, so not quite as chilly out there to start Monday as Sunday morning, lows 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Monday, well, it is going to be a dull start out there for most of us with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. In any sheltered spots further towards the east, though, we may get away with some brighter spells to start the day across parts of Scotland. Otherwise, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle across Northern Ireland, mild here. May be seeing more persistent rain across the hills, across Wales, with the southwest seeing some sunshine to start Monday morning. But otherwise, not much changes throughout the day. It is going to be a dull day out there with a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle on and off. There may be some breaks in the cloud, especially towards eastern areas and towards the far southeast as we go into the afternoon. And here we'll see temperatures rising, perhaps up to 16, possibly 17 degrees. Otherwise, staying up at around 14 or 15 degrees towards the north. So as we go through Monday evening and overnight, again, a very similar picture out there. A lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle, maybe seeing drier conditions towards the far southeast. And then higher pressure dominates Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. But once again, it won't be blue skies. There'll still be a lot of cloud around. Bye-bye.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark Meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 38 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome. Nice to have your company. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. This is at GB News. We are Britain's news channel. Now, the question I'm asking is, would you trust Gen Z to defend the nation? A survey conducted by the Ministry of Defence Armed has revealed that young troops are demanding better Wi-Fi, double beds and ensuite bathrooms as conditions for joining up. It also suggested that thousands of troops are leaving the armed forces every year because of substandard housing and poor quality of food and also things that have been served in the canteens and stuff like that, with many claiming that this new generation is a soft touch for. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would you trust Gen Z to defend the nation? Well, joining me now, Ivor Kaplan and also Danny Kelly. All right, Ivor Kaplan, you were a were you a Defence Minister? What was your position? You worked within Defence.
I was the Veterans Minister.
Veterans Minister.
The first one in 2003. But also I had responsibility for a whole load of other matters within the defence profile, which included what do you do with new people wanting to come in. I have to say I was quite amused by that list of what people these days might be asking for. Yeah. I went to loads of places where I wanted to see what was actually going on. And we did do quite a bit of housing. We used to bring housing in because it was an easier thing to do in terms of some of the centre stuff, particularly in the Oxford areas and those sort of areas. So we tried our best, but it's a very difficult thing to do. And I know that other people who followed me in terms of those positions have had those struggles with trying to get more housing available for people and better housing. We know those are still critical things, and here we are 20 years on or so, and we still need to do it. And I don't think that's not a good point to be in, really.
Well, Danny Kelly, what do you think? I mean, are they pushing it? Would you trust them? They seem to be... They want good quality food served in
double beds, decent food and a broadband connection. Broadband is essential to everything we do in 2024. So double beds, they don't want to maybe shower with other men and ensuite bathrooms. Well, look, obviously that's not going to happen. But the core of this is, do I trust young people in times of national and international crisis to pick up arms and defend the United Kingdom? I think that I do. And I think you'll always find, whenever you see a documentary about troops on the front line, you'll invariably hear soldiers, and they'll have Scouse accents, they'll have Geordie accents, they'll have Brummie accents, Manc accents, they'll have Sussex accents, whatever accent that might be. I refer to my friend because he's a Brighton and Hove Albion fan. But you see my point. These are gritty young men who come from areas of deprivation. And unless you go fast-track through Sandhurst via various universities, invariably, and then you become an officer, invariably you will come from a working-class area, and maybe it's an essential job that you need to take because there's nothing else around. And I don't think that's unreasonable. And do I trust young Scousers to pick up arms and young Mancs? I do.
Really?
Yes, of course, because they're working class, gritty lads, and I would say that they're on the right side of culture wars, because often we're referring to Gen Z, so that's part of the culture war generation. And I think if you're a young 18, 19-year-old lad from Liverpool and there was a national service introduced, I think he'd do the right thing and pick up a rifle.
I don't support. Sorry.
Well, this is what I was going to say very quickly, Ivor. Then I've got to get to my great.
I don't support national service. No. But what I do know is that young people wanted to come in to the army, and the numbers we had at the time were very, very high. But over these last 15, 20 years, we just haven't been able to keep that up. And I think that's where we need to get this right.
All right. Well, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our Great British Voice, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go to Watford. Let's have a chat with David Balm. David, do you trust Gen Z to pick up arms if they needed to and join the armed forces and defend this country?
I actually agree with Danny. I think if there was a crisis, then yes. But when this first came up, this topic came up, I was going to go all angry of Watford here. How dare they, blah, blah, blah. But I actually remember that at the time, I think even going back as far as the Falklands, the quality of housing for servicemen and women was appalling. Black mould, and people were very, very ill. And successive governments have promised to resolve that. I think if you can get decent housing for soldiers, forget the ensuite, and have proper Wi-Fi connection, then that will make a long way to pacifying a lot of people who say, I don't want to go to the army because of X. You've got to have decent housing, you've got to have decent food, and you've got to have amenities that people would want to say, OK, I'm happy to go to the army. But I won't get angry at Watford.
Yeah, because in a way, because I was going to write a monologue on this, but I stopped because I thought they're right there, aren't they? Like, you know, they want good quality. You know, you look at it and on the surface it's a story, you sort of think, oh, well, they're being a bit silly, they're joining the army. I mean, if they started to do all the pronouns bit, then I'm afraid they'd lose me there. You know, you know, all the all sort of, all that. I don't want to get involved in that discussion.
We're asking men and women to literally lay down their lives for the country. We do bad enough things for them when they come out. We have no real VA service for them. We all support them by wearing poppies at various times of the year. But we do not really support the service personnel when they leave. And I think we need to do far more for the people in the services now and for those who, when they leave.
Exactly. Well, listen, David, thank you very much. That's David Palm. He's our great British voice. Lovely to speak to you. He's in Watford. Right, well, this is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up in the next hour, my great British debate, I'm asking, would you trust Gen Z? We've just done that. I feel like I'm just having this moment again. Stay with me. Loads more still to come.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Georgia. Your story is incredible. Just remind us of it. You quit running in, was it 2017? Because I mean, to be quite frank, your body was knackered, you had injuries, you thought you couldn't go on anymore. But then you started running again at Parkrun in 2022. And of course, this summer at the Olympics, you won bronze.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, it has been a bit of a journey. And yeah, there was a period of time where I stopped running completely. And then Parkrun was just something I got into with my friends, my family, just local community. And I started to see the improvements that led me to get back in contact with my old coach and just worked my way back up to elite level running and got a bronze medal this summer in Paris.
Did you ever think that would happen when you were beginning to take part in parkruns again? Did you ever think you'd be winning bronze in the 1500 metres at the Olympics?
No, not at all. It would have been absolutely bonkers, I think, to think that at the time. It was just building my way up, but it was all about finding happiness in running again. And that's really what Parkrun does, I think, really well.
And can you just tell us in the audience what had happened to you in 2017?
So I had been like a good junior athlete. I had gone over to the US on a track scholarship at university, and I just experienced so many different injuries. So various stress fractures in my shins, and I just graduated and just thought there's no way I can run anymore. So took a big break. And then, yeah, over the past few years, I just got back into running slowly, built it up, and Parkrun is just something that is on every Saturday. So many parks across the UK, very accessible, free. So it was just a really good way to get back into a fun but semi-level of competitive running.
The People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's 48 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, police officers are set to become higher rate taxpayers by the end of the decade, as Rachel Reeves considers a stealth tax on income. Now, it would mean that middle-income professionals, including police officers, will be dragged into the 40% tax bracket. That's known as fiscal drag, as their earnings steadily grow, risking penalising key workers across the country. So even though, you know, we haven't got the full budget, but we suspect this is what's going to happen, they're going to freeze income tax levels. It means that a lot of those workers will be dragged into a higher bracket. This has also raised fresh questions about whether we take our police officers for granted. Who would be one? So joining me now to give us the thoughts on this story is former Metropolitan Police Officer Norman Bredon. Norman, it just seems to get worse for the police every time I look. Why would anyone want to do this job?
Well, I think if we look at the headlines over the last week or two, Nana, you're absolutely right. But let's move on from that. You're absolutely correct. Police officers throughout their career will face between 400 and 600 of the most dreadful sights and memories. It has devastating and long-lasting effects on them, even when they've retired. But let me just tell you what it used to be like. The police, when we joined the police service, we had free accommodation, and we had our lessons, we had accommodation, we had training that was paid for by the state. As soon as we left our training college, our money was rubbish, to be quite honest with you. So the police gave us cheap housing. They also gave us section houses. We had canteens, which were subsidised. We had social clubs that were subsidised, and police officers were given free parking. Now, all these decades on, police often have to pay for part of their own training. They have to pay huge amounts for travel, because often they're doing 12 or 16 hours a day, so have to drive home. They don't really get the free travel anymore. And a basic officer will earn £29,000 a year. That means just under £2,000 a month. These officers, Nana, work 24 hours a day. They work huge hours. They take huge risks. Many are assaulted, abused and insulted, spat at and kicked. They're fouled by just about everyone, and for £2,000. And when you think that we had 22,000 officers stolen from us under Theresa May's government, out of the 20,000 officers that have rejoined, well, not rejoined, the new ones, 5,000 have already resigned. And one of the biggest concerns they have is that they cannot afford all of the bills. And some of the officers are not even paying into their pensions. So basically, police officers are earning peanuts. And not only that, I can tell you now from speaking to senior Federation officials, some officers are lining up at food banks. Now, what does that say for the emergency service that protects us of society?
Well, I think it's awful. And they're not allowed to strike. So unlike train drivers and all the others, a lot of the public sector workers who can strike, they are not allowed to strike. It would be devastating if they did. What would happen if the police did go on strike?
Well, I posted on social media today because I have nearly 100,000 followers, and I post on policing, victims' issues, public issues. I have a passion about all of them. I have for 40-odd years. And I said, just imagine if the police actually left the streets of Britain for a year. Within weeks, within the black communities, within white communities, the gangs, the cross-border crimes would be absolutely out of control. And without the men and women that get up each day to stand between good and bad, right and wrong, we would truly have anarchy on the streets. And just to finish off with, I took a pay drop when I joined the police at 19. I trained as a butcher. I was doing a bit of lorry driving, etc. And when I joined the police, it was a passion. It was something I really wanted to do. And I took a pay drop. But within 2 years, Sir Edmund Davis, under Margaret Thatcher, the best and the only Prime Minister that's ever cared and looked after the police. Do you know, Nana, they gave us a pay rise equivalent to £10,000 a year for every single police officer in Britain. I cannot tell you how that boosted our morale. We went out and we had the officers then, we interacted with the public, we did everything they wanted. And do you know what? We felt that we were valued with that money. Nowadays, police officers are given scraps. They're used, abused, they're the cannon fodder of society, and they truly have become the Aunt Sallies of society in every part of that meaning. And when you think that they're paid derisory amounts, and even when you work to sergeant and inspector, which normally takes quite a few good years, instead of getting a good old jump in salary, as you rightly highlight in the opening of your programme, they're going to be hammered with 40% taxing. Now, I believe that if you truly cared about the police, and sadly not many do, Nana, fortunately a lot more do than some police officers think, we should give every single serving police officer and every emergency service officer and the military a £10,000 pay increase. That would certainly
well, listen,
turn
Norman, I agree with you, and I think many do as well. That's Norman Brennan. This is GB News. Let's get an update with your weather. Oh.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be wet and windy in the northwest today, brighter elsewhere before turning cloudier for all of us on Monday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got a ridge of higher pressure extending across the south of the UK, but the next frontal system coming in from the northwest, affecting much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. So a damp end to the day here with outbreaks of rain. That will gradually sink its way south and eastwards, could turn heavy at times across parts of Cumbria. Towards the far southeast, probably holding on to the driest conditions as we go to start Monday morning. But otherwise, a lot of cloud around. That will help keep the temperatures up, so not quite as chilly out there to start Monday as Sunday morning, lows 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Monday, well, it is going to be a dull start out there for most of us, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. In any sheltered spots further towards the east, though, we may get away with some brighter spells to start the day across parts of Scotland. Otherwise, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle across Northern Ireland, mild here. May be seeing more persistent rain across the hills, across Wales, with the southwest seeing some sunshine to start Monday morning. But otherwise, not much changes throughout the day. It is going to be a dull day out there with a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle on and off. There may be some breaks in the cloud, especially towards eastern areas and towards the far southeast as we go into the afternoon. And here we'll see temperatures rising, perhaps up to 16, possibly 17 degrees. Otherwise, staying up at around 14 or 15 degrees towards the north. So as we go through Monday evening and overnight, again, a very similar picture out there. A lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle, maybe seeing drier conditions towards the far southeast. And then higher pressure dominates Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. But once again, it won't be blue skies. There'll still be a lot of cloud around. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed boiler repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me for this hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. On today's show, with just 3 days to go before Rachel Reeves delivers her maiden budget as Chancellor, we'll continue to discuss the news that over 1,600 businesses have shut shop ahead of the anticipated rise in capital gains tax, and whether you believe that Rachel Reeves can be trusted with the economy. Then in the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would you trust Gen Z to defend the nation? All of this is revealed after soldiers aged of 27 are demanding double beds, ensuite toilets and the like. In the interview, joining me, historian Martin Whittock for an in-depth discussion on the case for and against slavery reparations. But before all that, let's get your latest news with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Nana. It's just after 5 o'clock, and these are your latest GB News headlines. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has failed to clarify what Labour means by working people, while thousands of businesses are closing their doors due to fears about Labour's upcoming budget. The Telegraph is reporting that more than 1,600 company directors have chosen to wind down their businesses so far this month, the highest number of closures this year and more than double the amount for the whole of last October. Speaking earlier on GB News, Bridget Phillipson avoided questions around whether people running small firms are working people.
I appreciate that it's frustrating that I can't comment on wider measures in the budget, but we haven't got long to wait. The Chancellor will set out everything on Wednesday. What our manifesto was clear about was that we didn't want working people to face higher taxes. We hold to that, and they will not see increases in VAT and national insurance or in income tax. And coming out of the budget, when they receive their payslip, they will not see higher taxes.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been heckled at a memorial service for the October 7th attacks, the Reuters news agency has said. As he began to give his speech, a few members of the bereaved family stood up and began to chant at Netanyahu. The hecklers were then escorted from the premises by security, and the Prime Minister continued to speak. Meanwhile, the US has said Israel's strikes on Iran should be the end of direct conflict between the two countries. Speaking after yesterday's attacks, the White House said Israel was acting in what they described as self-defense, but added they are fully prepared to defend Israel should Iran choose to respond. This comes as Iran's president has warned against further attacks on the country. Meanwhile, at least 35 people have been injured, 6 reportedly seriously, after a truck hit a bus stop in central Israel this morning. Israeli police say the suspected ramming attack north of Tel Aviv is being treated as a possible terror incident. Police have confirmed the driver of the bus was an Israeli citizen. Some tragic news now, and following a fatal road collision in the early hours of Saturday morning, 39-year-old Craig Nunn has been charged with causing death by dangerous driving. A 3-week-old baby died following the crash in Stockport, Greater Manchester, whilst a man and woman also in the vehicle were treated in hospital for their injuries. A man has been charged with attempted murder after a woman and 2 children suffered stab wounds in what's been described by police as a truly shocking incident. Police were called to Dagenham, where they found the woman in her 30s, an 8-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, all suffering from stab wounds. The Metropolitan Police said they were taken to hospital and none are in a life-threatening condition. 48-year-old Kulvinder Ram will appear in court on Monday, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder. A man has died after a boat carrying migrants deflated in the English Channel on Sunday morning, French authorities have said. It comes after GB News revealed the number of Channel migrants arriving in the UK so far this year has already overtaken the 29,437 that crossed last year. Prince William has extended what's being called an olive branch to Prince Harry by publicly naming him for the first time in 6 years.
My mother took me to the Passage. She took Harry and I both there. There must have been about 11, I think, probably at the time, maybe 10. I'd never been to anything like that before, and I was a bit anxious as to what to expect.
That's part of a new ITV documentary following the Prince of Wales and the first year of his Homewards programme that aims to end homelessness. The film, titled Prince William, We Can End Homelessness, includes poignant unseen photos of William and Diana at the Passage in Westminster. Over to the world of sport now, and British tennis number 1 Jack Draper has won his 2nd ATP title at the Erste Bank Open in Austria. The 22-year-old won in straight sets against Russian Karen Khachanov to take the victory. Speaking after the match, Draper described the win as a relief, saying, "It got really tight there for a minute, but I stayed solid, I stayed mentally in a good frame, and luckily I was able to come through when it mattered." And finally, a British woman has begun her attempt to become the first woman to row solo from mainland Europe to South America. 21-year-old Zara Lachlan set off from Lagos on the Portuguese Algarve early this morning and will now aim to row the 3,600 miles to French Guyana, a journey that will take an estimated 90 days. We wish Zara all the best of luck. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper, but now it's back to Nana.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
So, thank you very much, Sophie. Right, it's coming up to 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Now, in a fierce contest for the Tory leadership, frontrunner Kevin Badenoch took a sharp jab at her rival Robert Jenrick, touting her clean record and claiming that members want integrity. Jenrick hit back, highlighting his concrete policies, as both insist the race is still neck and neck. Well, joining me now, former Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, thank you very much for joining me. So the two candidates, they're neck and neck. That's what she's saying, although a lot of reports are saying that Kemi Badenoch is well ahead. Are these reports trustworthy, and who do you support?
I'm not supporting anybody yet. I mean, I've been invited onto your programme, actually, perhaps to make an appeal, which I think would resonate with many of our party members, and indeed anybody minding to vote Conservative, that we need to see the Conservative Party return with strength. That's what we need to do. Opposition is our first port of call, or as a stepping stone to potentially getting back into government. So we're looking for a leader that's going to unite the party. Now, where we are today, we've got these two candidates. We wanted clarity from the members of Parliament as to who they liked, but that was a three-way split. So if we are going to unite our party, then I would encourage both the final contestants to make sure that they offer that broad church appeal. We need to confirm where we sit in the political spectrum. That's not clear yet. And let's be honest and frank about ourselves. The nation really is not listening to us yet. We've got time to regroup, to refresh, to craft a longer-term narrative that helps broaden that electoral appeal, particularly with voters under 30. And if I may, moving into the subject area of my most concern, which is defense and security. Look up. Our world is getting more dangerous, not less. It's splintering into two spheres of influence. And the Conservative Party, whether in opposition or indeed in government, has long played a role in British leadership on the international stage. And there's a void of that. I've just come back to the United States the last week. And they are so isolated, if you like, from global events, so focused on America alone. But the world is changing fast. We had a Commonwealth summit and we had a BRICS summit staying at the same place. And the Indian leader chose to avoid the Commonwealth summit in Samoa and go and join President Putin, who many of us thought it was isolated after Ukraine. Who else was there? President Xi was there as well. Turkey was represented. Even the head of the UN turned up in Russia. And that shows where our world is. These are the bigger picture issues. Let's not get sucked into the vortex of minutiae policy announcements, which I'm afraid we could do in these last few days.
A lot of people might argue that the Conservative Party feel largely irrelevant with what's going on because they've spent quite a lot of time navel-gazing and determining who should be their leader. Well, are they wise to be spending this sort of time, or should they just literally just get on with it?
Both are important. We do need, as I say, a strong opposition to hold this government to account, not least because of the very reasons I've said, because the world is changing fast. But we've also got to get it right as well. You rush in, you then make a mistake. We could, worst case, end up doing this again. We've had a few, going around that buoy a few times over the last few years. So it is difficult, no doubt about it. I go back to the fact that the MPs, the backbenchers and so on, that the leader will now have to unite, were split themselves. So it's so important that we move on from the tribal politics that was so soul-destroying, but also so negative, and I think contributed to us losing the last general election.
I would agree with that, all the arguments and everything else. But the issue, I feel, both candidates are pretty good, I think. They're probably the best that the Conservatives have at this moment. But Kemi Badenoch hasn't really been very specific about her policy. So how would she be able to unite people if people don't really know what she's going to do?
Yeah, I think actually that might point to the mechanics in which we choose a leader. This is one of the reasons why William Hague himself has said we need to change the rules, allow our membership to perhaps choose the final few, but then allow the members of Parliament to choose the final one, as it was done in the past before William did change the rules. Because of that, then you've got all the potential contestants tailoring their thoughts, their policy ideas to fit in to what best suits our party membership. That's fine, but it isn't just the party membership that you need to gain on your side. If you want to win a general election, you need to be appealing to the British electorate as a whole. And that's perhaps why is that you're going to hear some of these people say certain things, but perhaps distance themselves from other things. Once the leader is in place, I do hope they will look bigger picture and look to unite the party and provide greater appeal to the broader British electorate.
But wasn't that part of the Conservative Party's problem? They didn't listen to their party members. So the party members didn't really want you to get rid of Boris Johnson, but they got rid of Boris Johnson thinking they could do better, find somebody better. And then they literally kind of chose who they wanted in the end. They didn't really want Liz Truss, so they kind of, I don't know, I didn't really enjoy watching the treatment towards Liz Truss. Then they put in Rishi Sunak. But hasn't this been the problem, that they're not listening to the members, which is why a lot of people who have joined as a member for the Conservative Party are leaving in their droves?
You're right. You don't want to dismiss the membership. The base is so important. They're the worker bees, if you like, that allow us to have that machine that provides the campaign support to actually, go out and win elections, local and indeed national as well. But ultimately, if you don't attract the wider nation, the floating voter, if you move to your extreme, to the right or indeed to the left, under Jeremy Corbyn to the left, they were never going to get elected. But if you leave that centre space open, then I'm afraid another party fills that. We saw that with Keir Starmer, we saw that with Tony Blair, as well. So where we place ourselves in the spectrum is very, very important indeed. Take your base with you, but also appeal to your base, educate your base, rather than just listening to what the noise is in your base and then saying, yes, I agree with your anger. That's not leadership. Leadership is about explaining the difficulties and saying, I have a solution, come with me, follow me. That's what I'd like to see more of.
I just think that they didn't really lose because they lost the centre ground. They lost because they moved too far into it and towards the left. So they literally left it somewhere else. And the Conservative values were not withheld, which is what would not held up, which meant that Nigel Farage and Reform could fill that space quite comfortably. Do you envisage any time where Reform and the Conservatives may in some way unite?
No, I think that would be very dangerous indeed for the reasons why I spelled out, because it would then move us to the right, and perhaps we feel there are some that would feel more comfortable in that space. But I think Britain, I still think this way. I've always felt that Britain is conservative with a small c. If you go too far to the right, then we will alienate. It's interesting you mentioned, the Reform. There were 5 doors in a row. I remember 5 houses in Bournemouth where I knocked on, and each one of them was saying, I'm voting Reform. After the election, I went back to those very 5 houses because they were quite distinct in a nice part of Bournemouth. And I then said, are you happy with the result? They didn't want the Conservatives to lose. They were upset. They said, I'm sorry, you've lost your seat personally. But their anger wasn't that we weren't right-wing enough. It was that we were too incompetent, that we were constantly in the headlines for the wrong reasons. So it was an inept tribal discord, disunity, all these sort of things, constant headlines for the wrong reasons. That's why they said, right, where can I put my vote? I'm not going to vote Labour, not going to vote Lib Democrat, so I'm going to vote for Reform. And but it wasn't because they want Reform to do well. They want the Conservative Party to do well. They want us to get back to our winning ways. It's a great party. We need to reinvent ourselves and recognise what we need to do in today's day and age. Crafting policy right now doesn't make sense. We're not going to be in power for another 5 years. And Britain's going to look so different then, economically, security-wise, digitally. So we need to be crafting policies, as I say, which are pertinent for the future, not just for today.
Well, I'd add on to that yes, the squabbling was the main reason why I think people just got sick of the Conservative Party, but also the failure to deal with policies that were more to the right. So, for example, EDI, which flourished under the Conservative Party, and taxes being so high, these things were not conducive to a Conservative government. And that's one of the reasons as well. But Tobias, we've run out of time. Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining me. That is Tobias Ellwood. He's a former Conservative MP. Well, let's discuss further with my panel. Broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. I'm going to come to you, Danny Kelly.
Do you know, they've turned on each other. Last week they were best of mates.
This is Kemi and Robert
and
Jenrick.
They've turned on each other. There's some great quotes. I watched GB News this morning. Fabulous interview with Camilla.
Oh, very good, isn't she?
Yeah, she's great at unpicking things. She's great, as most of the presenters are here. There's a quote here. Mr. Jenrick, his allies believe that Kemi Badenoch is, and I'm quoting it, lazy and has a habit of being late to events. OK, now, friends of Kemi Badenoch are now saying about Jenrick could be damaged goods because he was given the boot by Boris Johnson. The perception was that he was in the pocket of a rich property developer. OK, so there's a whiff of corruption there. Is this really the best two that we have? Someone who can't turn up on time and is lazy, perception, don't know whether it's true, and someone who was given the boot. Can you imagine how vulnerable you are at the dispatch box if you've been sacked? If you're the potential next Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister, the Tory Prime Minister in 2019, 2021, he sacked you. And I don't know whether that's relevant, but I think if that's the best we've got, or if you're a Conservative voter, if that's the best you got, I think you're in trouble.
Ivor Kaplan.
I don't know what to say, really. It's not for me to comment on what the Tories want to do between these two candidates. I think there have been better Tories candidates, I have to say. I thought Tobias was very, very sensible in what he said just now in that interview. And, at some point on the 2nd of November, I think, next Saturday, we'll get a result. And I think that the Conservative Party will need to look at what it does next. I mean, we've been in that position on numerous occasions over the last 30 years, where we've had to look ourselves in as a Labour Party and find the right way to do things. And I think the Conservative Party needs at least to do that.
All right, well, listen, we've just got some breaking news. New CCTV footage has emerged showing Labour MP Mike Amesbury punching a man in the street. Now, the new video obtained by Mail Online shows that the MP for Runcorn and Helsby punching a man and then hitting him repeatedly after he fell to the ground. So, quickly to the panel, thoughts on that?
I saw a clip last night on this matter, which was him shouting at someone. But I haven't seen this clip, obviously.
I've seen the clip. If you want me to tell you what goes on, basically, they're not squaring up to each other, and all of a sudden the MP smacks this guy, a taller guy. You know how many people lose their lives because they've been hit on the jaw and then cracked their head? This guy's lucky, in my humble opinion, not to have smacked his head, become concussed, and then the MP, whilst he's down and vulnerable, gives him a few more digs.
What?
He's going to get nicked. And it's going to be an interesting story as to what provoked him.
Yeah, he did say, I think, late last night that he was going to cooperate with the police.
Handed himself in.
He's going to get himself in.
It wasn't self-defence. There was no physical element of self-defence.
You don't know what happened before the footage.
No, you're right, but it wasn't like he ducked and then smacked him.
No, all I'm saying is that where the footage starts and ends, what I think any judge would say is you don't know what happened before filming.
I don't know about the conversation.
So you don't know what happened before.
Yeah, we don't know that.
But we do have a statement, so let me tell you what that statement says. So just some breaking news here we go, let's go for our statement. Yes, so of course the MP did hand himself into the police and but in a statement, Amesbury said he was determined to remain an open and accessible MP for our community and would cooperate with any inquiries officers had about the apparent altercation. Last night, I was involved in an incident that took place after I felt threatened on the street following an evening out with friends. He added, this morning I contacted Cheshire Police myself to report what happened during the incident. I will not be making further public comment, but will of course cooperate with any inquiries if required by Cheshire Police. I remain fully committed to working hard for the people of Runcorn and Helsby and am determined to remain an open and accessible MP for our community. Well, so some more footage has emerged on that. So we did talk about that yesterday, but more footage has come to light. Stay with me, though, because next, the interview. I'll be joined by historian Martin Whittock for an in-depth discussion about the cases for and against slavery reparations. Stay tuned.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
True crime is everywhere.
Yep, next weekend, CrimeCon UK takes place in London. And joining us now to tell us more about that event and the true crime phenomena is former detective Stephen. How do you pronounce your surname? Keogh. Sorry, Stephen.
That's all right.
I should have checked you before.
No worries.
And Nancy, and again, Nancy, what's your surname?
Bourne.
Bourne, thank you. I'm showing my ignorance there, but thank you both for joining us. So, Stephen, you're a former top cop. Hope you don't mind me describing you as that. At CrimeCon and other events like that, do you get into sort of the semantics of the investigations and, you know, how... For example, how I was watching something the other night where somebody was unfortunately murdered, but you saw the crime scene investigators trying to work out from which side the person was attacked from. Did the knife come from the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Is it all that kind of stuff?
So for me, everything I've done since I've left the police is about sharing that knowledge of investigations, because if you watch TV, they get it wrong a lot. So what we try and do, I'm not the only police officer there, there's experts, so forensic scientists, psychologists, all from that investigative world, just trying to get across, well, actually, this is how it's really done. This is what we do, not what you're going to see on telly. And I think that's really important. So for me personally, coming along to CrimeCon, I just look at the list of people that are there, honestly, and I'm proud to be associated with them. There are some fascinating people there, People have really fought for justice for their children. People are campaigning for victims, for survivors. So it's an event that, when you look at the name, you might think, oh, they're just going to sit there talking about serial killers and what they got up to. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about what goes on, how it impacts the victims, how the investigations are carried out. It's educational as much as anything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you just tuned in, where have you been?
England player.
Just over half an hour left, but it's good. I'm glad you're here now. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Also, don't forget you can stream us on YouTube. But now it's time for the interview, and today I'm joined by historian Martin Whittock for a discussion about the cases for and against slavery reparations. And this comes as Keir Starmer has faced a setback after Caribbean leaders succeeded in pushing forward a call for reparations over Britain's historic role in the transatlantic slave trade at the Commonwealth Summit. Despite UK resistance, leaders voiced the need for a meaningful discussion on reparations. Well, joining me now is historian Martin Whittock. Martin, thank you very much and welcome to the programme. All right, Martin, look, a lot of people are sick and tired of the conversation about reparations. It happened a very, very long time ago. And the Commonwealth countries have benefited in some respect because Britain have had a little bit of control and paid in to the pot of the Commonwealth. Why is there the argument that Britain needs to continue paying more reparations?
OK. Quick overview, case for, case against? OK, case for. About 3.1 million people were transported on British ships from Africa. About 2.7 million arrived because others died on the Middle Passage. The argument being that Britain received 2 centuries of unpaid labour from over 15 million African slaves in total, and the wealth generated by the slave plantations and associated industries amounted to about 11% of the total British economy by the early 19th century. So a very major kickstart for the Industrial Revolution for Britain. Not the only one, but obviously a major input into that. To compensate slave owners, I hasten to add, in 1833, when slavery was abolished, the slave trade had been abolished in 1807, so that's slightly different. The government took out such a huge loan that it only finished paying it off in 2015. And that's a huge amount of money that only went to slave owners, nothing went to the slaves. And for about 10 years or so after the abolition of slavery, slaves were still working as indentured servants, which kind of like slavery light, and still being heavily exploited. Many Caribbean countries still struggle to cope with the legacy of poverty and ill health caused by slavery. For example, huge amounts of sugar was fed to slaves, excess sugar, which has caused health issues that carried on through the generations. So the argument is that Britain benefited hugely from the slave trade, that countries that suffered as a result of it, particularly in the Caribbean, are still suffering from it. That's kind of like an overview of the case for reparations for slavery. The case against, or to say that it's more complex than that, is, of course, that Britain was not the only nation involved in the slave trade. By the end of the 18th century, it was the primary mover of slaves from West Africa to particularly the Caribbean and from there to the Americas in what was called the triangular trade. Other nations involved as well, of course, Spain, Portugal, even Denmark, if you can believe that. And America, of course, had slaves right through till the emancipation of slaves, or the act that emancipated slaves in 1863. So that's a complexity. It's not only Britain. The other complexity is, of course, that Britain and white slavers were not the only people involved in this iniquitous trade. There were many elites in West Africa, for example, in areas that we called the Ivory Coast and the Gold Coast at the time, areas like Ghana and Nigeria today. Not ordinary Africans, but elites and their supporters who actually trafficked in slaves from the interior. So they were not the only people involved in slave trade. That's the British. Others were involved in it as well. Many Arabs, of course, were involved in the slave trade, particularly on the east coast of Africa. So that goes for a very complicated story. In addition to that, of course, there is the argument that since the Second World War, for example, Britain particularly has made a lot of contributions in terms of foreign aid to the Commonwealth. And whilst that might not go to writing off the entire bill, as it were, that is obviously part of the kind of the creating of a slightly more level playing field, given the inequalities the Caribbean has experienced. And against that is the argument that the whole thing is more complicated than we can imagine. How would you begin to calculate it? And actually, shouldn't we be looking at something more complex, like, for example, debt reduction, climate change ameliation, rather than simply giving a straight bill to one country? So that was quite a quick overview. It was very good. I'm sure I haven't covered everything, but that's kind of the case for and against in a nutshell, as it were.
So, look, the huge amount of money that was generated, 11% of GDP, you suggested, which is why the economy grew so well at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But then they paid a huge amount back to compensate the owners, which was to free the slaves, as I understand it. So it was like their bond to make sure the slaves could be free, because the industry was actually an actual viable legal industry at the time. Surely they almost counteract each other. And actually, even though the money didn't go directly to the slaves, it was to free them, so that they could then go on and be, people in their own right without needing to, be tied to a master. So I don't really understand why we continue, or we are allowing ourselves to be drawn into the conversation of reparations, when in reality, who are you going to pay back? I mean, you don't know whether somebody's actually a descendant from a slave or a slave owner. And also nobody's going back to the Africans who sold the people in the first place. And currently we have modern-day slavery right here, right now. I don't understand why there is this will to continue to go backwards in time to make ourselves feel better for a situation that slavery, whilst it was bad, may well have improved this prognosis of a lot of these countries in any case.
Well, you certainly put your finger on some of the very complex issues there, Nana, and you're absolutely right. It is extraordinarily complex. So what would be the pushback against that position? Well, I guess the argument would be that although obviously the British government paid this huge amount to cause the freeing of the slaves, the Caribbean communities have continued to suffer poverty, inequality, which can be traced back to the legacy of the slave trade and the simple economics that, something like 50 million Africans worked for nothing for 200 years or so. So there is this argument that the Caribbean basically entered this freer stage, actually heavily shackled, the terms of trade very much against it, and people actually starting from a very, very low baseline. And therefore, there is this historic situation whereby the Caribbean is behind because of the way in which it was treated by the British Empire. But you're quite right in saying, of course, that Britain was not the only one involved in this, and it's very, very complicated. Why has it emerged now? Well, a number of factors, I guess, have flowed into that. I mean, a lot of people started talking about this a lot more after 2015, but not solely then, but when that great loan to slave owners was paid off. I think it got a lot of people thinking, well, wait a minute, why was nobody ever protesting against this? But they obviously are pushing back against the idea of compensating, if you like, the slaves and their descendants. That got a lot of people talking. And I guess also the whole situation of the Black Lives Matter movement in sort of the 2020s got a lot of people looking at historic attitudes of racism, historic attitudes of injustice, and how that is still continuing to happen and unravel in the modern world.
But those attitudes are perpetuated by the people who are perpetuating them, and you could choose to change that narrative yourself personally and individually. And I do think that there's this victimhood mentality that continues to sort of power this, when actually slavery is going on now. and we should address what's happening right now, because otherwise we are all guilty now of perpetuating slavery by buying our phones, our laptops and everything else. So will those people come back to us and complain about the conditions that they've been put in because of our behaviour now? Martin, I could talk to you forever, but thank you very much for your thoughts. Really good to hear. That's Martin Whittock. He's a historian. What did you think? gbnews.com/your say. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. If you've just tuned in, 33 minutes after 5 o'clock. Still to come, rich people are threatening to flee Britain to avoid tax rises in the upcoming budget, and leading Labour donors has told them to leave, just leave the country. You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, but first let's get your latest news with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Nana. Let's take a look at your latest GB News headlines. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been heckled at a memorial service for the October 7th attacks. As he began to give his speech, a few members of bereaved families stood up and began to chant at Netanyahu. The hecklers were then escorted from the premises by security, and the Prime Minister continued speaking. New CCTV obtained by the Mail Online appears to show Labour MP for Runcorn and Helsby, Mike Amesbury, punching a constituent following an incident in the early hours of Saturday night. Cheshire Police have confirmed they were called to reports of an assault in Frodsham and that inquiries are now ongoing. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has failed to clarify what Labour means by working people, while thousands of businesses are closing their doors due to fears about Labour's upcoming budget. According to the Telegraph newspaper, more than 1,600 company directors have chosen to wind down their businesses so far this month. That's the highest number of closures this year and more than double the amounts for the whole of last October. This comes as Sir Keir Starmer denied misleading the public after promising not to raise taxes on working people in the run-up to the general election. A man has died after a boat carrying migrants deflated in the English Channel on Sunday morning, French authorities have said. It comes after GB News revealed the number of Channel migrants arriving in the UK so far this year has already surpassed the 29,437 that crossed last year. Prince William has extended what's being called an olive branch to Prince Harry by publicly naming him for the first time in 6 years.
My mother took me to the passage. She took Harry and I both there. There must have been about 11, I think, probably at the time, maybe 10. I'd never been to anything like that before, and I was a bit anxious as to what to expect.
That's part of a new ITV documentary following the Prince of Wales and the first year of his Homewards programme, which aims to end homelessness. The film, titled Prince William, We Can End Homelessness, includes poignant photos of William and Diana at the Passage in Westminster. And in other royal news, the King is set to return to full royal duties next year, including an overseas tour. That's despite his ongoing cancer treatment. A palace official described his trip to Australia and Samoa as a perfect tonic, adding it had lifted his spirits. King Charles will fly abroad during the spring and autumn, the traditional periods for official foreign royal trips, provided doctors sanction the travel. And a British woman has begun her attempt to become the first woman to row solo from mainland Europe all the way to South America. 21-year-old Zara Lachlan set off from Lagos on the Portuguese Algarve earlier this morning and will now aim to row the 3,600 miles to French Guiana, a journey that will take an estimated 90 days. That's rather Zara than me, anyway. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be wet and windy in the northwest today, brighter elsewhere before turning cloudier for all of us on Monday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got a ridge of higher pressure extending across the south of the UK, but the next frontal system coming in from the northwest, affecting much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. So a damp end to the day here with outbreaks of rain. That will gradually sink its way south and eastwards, could turn heavy at times across parts of Cumbria. Towards the far southeast, probably holding on to the driest conditions as we go to start Monday morning. But otherwise, a lot of cloud around. That will help keep the temperatures up, so not quite as chilly out there to start Monday as Sunday morning, lows 10 or 11 degrees. So as we start Monday, well, it is going to be a dull start out there for most of us, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. In any sheltered spots further towards the east, though, we may get away with some brighter spells to start the day across parts of Scotland. Otherwise, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle across Northern Ireland, mild here. May be seeing more persistent rain across the hills, across Wales, with the southwest seeing some sunshine to start Monday morning. But otherwise, not much changes throughout the day. It is going to be a dull day out there with a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle on and off. There may be some breaks in the cloud, especially towards eastern areas and towards the far southeast as we go into the afternoon. And here we'll see temperatures rising, perhaps up to 16, possibly 17 degrees. Otherwise, staying up at around 14 or 15 degrees towards the north. So as we go through Monday evening and overnight, again, a very similar picture out there. A lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle, maybe seeing drier conditions towards the far southeast. And then higher pressure dominates Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. But once again, it won't be blue skies. There'll still be a lot of cloud around. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's just going for 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. Welcome. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. Time now for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, are Labour really the party of business? Rich people threatening to flee Britain to avoid tax rises should leave. That's what Labour donor Dale Vince has said. He's an energy tycoon. He's defended the reported tax rises in Wednesday's budget, saying the country would be better off without the rich who are complaining. The wealthy are expected to heavily target in the budget, with options on the table, including raising capital gains tax and reforming inheritance tax. So what do you think? For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are Labour really the party of business? Well, joining me to discuss, broadcaster and journalist Annie Kelly, also former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. Ivor.
Yes.
Are they the party of business? People are leaving.
Yes. And just to deal with this inheritance tax issue, this has been, must be at least 20, maybe 30 years that everyone has been saying we should get this sorted out.
Yeah.
It was quite familiar. I can remember being in this very studio with various people from GB News and talking about inheritance tax, and they looked at me like I was saying something completely mad.
Well, what were you saying?
Well, I was saying that we need a proper way of dealing with inheritance tax for the long term, not just tinkering along and doing something for a year or 2 years. You have to do it in a proper way.
And what would you suggest should happen with inheritance tax?
I don't know those details, I have to be honest, but I know that there are people in Westminster now who think that they have got a plan, a proper plan on inheritance tax and how it can be used to everyone's benefit.
They should scrap it completely.
That's another option,
They should scrap
of course.
it.
That's
You shouldn't
another
tax
option.
people when they're dead. Danny Kelly.
This is about business, as I understand.
Yeah, sorry,
we're going to find out Wednesday. But if the press leaks are to be believed and if they are credible, making an employer put 2% more national insurance contribution, that doesn't suggest to me they're on the side of the employer or the business, because that's going to have a trickle-down effect. I mentioned earlier, if somebody merits a pay rise, the employer would say, well, look, I'd love to give you 5%, I can only give you 3% because I've got to pay another 2% towards your NI. I will wait and find out Wednesday, Thursday morning. It's fascinating having Ivor here because Tony Blair, love or hate him, and he is a polarising figure, one of his successful traits was that he managed to combine socialism with capitalism. Now, we've heard that this is an incredibly hard-left socialist government. We'll find out Wednesday. And the fallout will be Thursday. But if they can replicate the success of Blair, because Blair was very pro-business.
They can't.
Blair was pro-business, wasn't he, Ivor?
Yes, he was, yeah.
You know,
all the time.
he was a big fan of PFI when it came to the healthcare, because he understood...
Well, that was a disaster.
Well, it didn't work properly. I think that's the point.
Well, that's the same thing.
That
is right.
Although that was a legacy, that was briefly part of Major's government, but it was really taken grip by Blair's government because he understood that ministers and mandarins couldn't run businesses. Businesses can run businesses.
But Delvin specifically has said that rich people are threatening to flee Britain to avoid tax rises. They should... something
Is that what Dale Vince says?
Dale Vince, yeah. Do you think he's right if people are leaving to avoid tax rises?
Well, we'll have to find out. Yeah. But if millionaires are fleeing because they want to keep hold of their assets and their business people...
Well, they don't want to be taxed on assets that, you know...
Look, if you're going to leave the country, that's a massive decision. And if you're going to leave a country because you're going to get taxed thousands of pounds or tens of hundreds of thousands...
probably.
Well, we're not talking millionaires, probably talking multi-millionaires.
You are talking about... Delvin, this is about millionaires, and I think a lot of them are leaving.
Charlie Mullins left. Pimlico Plumbers.
A lot of them
He's still here. He's in Dubai, I think.
Yeah, no, but he's moved us, so you move... The thing is with rich people, you can't really tax them in that way because they just move their assets somewhere else or they register it elsewhere. Yeah. So this doesn't work. So if you make them do that by coming up with policies that are not favourable, they'll just simply do that. They're the most mobile of all. So this is a very silly...
I don't buy that, Nana, because these wealthy...
They are mobile.
Yeah, but these... Well, yes, in theory, but they've also got children at school.
So?
Well, they're not going to necessarily...
I can re-register my business in Ireland or somewhere else like that, or Italy, where I've got much more favourable tax.
But Dale Vince, or I keep getting his surname... Vince, he said they're leaving. He didn't say that... Oh, well, I go back to my earlier point. They've got children at school. They've got lots of connections in Britain.
They'll be in boarding schools.
But are they necessarily going to take their children from boarding school in Britain to a boarding school in Italy?
No, they could leave the children at boarding school because it doesn't matter where you are.
So they're going to leave their kids in England, but they're going to go to Italy?
I know that's difficult to understand, but it's true, Daddy. That's what happened with my parents. They left me. They left me. But I was glad. They left me in a boarding... I went to boarding school in the UK. They lived in America. That's how it works. That's why people go to boarding school.
I went to boarding school as well all those years ago. And, you know, I can remember not being interested in going home or anything like that. I was too busy doing everything that I wanted to do there, you know, on the stage and playing football and cricket.
They're going to go because they're the most mobile of all. But
we are going to find out. We
will find out on Wednesday, God help us.
We will.
Coming up after the break, Supplement Sunday with the panel and I discuss some of the stories that caught their eye this week. Stay tuned.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight
and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
You must be so proud of your daughter being so just amazingly brave and a model for other people who face illness.
I think we're proud of her all day, every day, and always have been. Liz has always given her all to anything she put her mind to, whether that was studying for her GCSE exams at school or whether it's been her photography and battling cancer. Liz never does anything by house, and we are so incredibly proud of her each and every day.
And Liz, I noticed a wonderful line from you saying that when you've got cancer, A-levels don't matter so much. That seems to me to be a very reasonable view to take and has given you then the chance to do these other amazing things that you will be doing more of in future with the London Ambulance Service. And I imagine many people will want to help you with your bucket list because they've now seen you and seen how brave you are.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we've already been overwhelmed by the responses and the support by so many people. I think when my mum originally posted the list, it received like 4,000 replies. It was insane, and still there's more. So from the bottom of our hearts, and especially mine, we just want to say thank you, because there's nothing that forces anyone to get in touch and say, hey, I have something you can do, pop over and do this or that, or it's just out of the generosity of their hearts. So thank you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, welcome if you just tuned in, 48 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Now, we love to hear what you think. Every day we've got our poll of the day. Today we asked, should Britain pay reparations to Commonwealth countries? The results are in, and yes, none of you said yes. 100% of you said no.
Wow.
This is the first. This is the first. So 100% of you said no, and there were no percentage saying don't know. Exactly. Nobody should be paying reparations. I don't think they should be. I'm not paying them. But for all our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll. It's a very good poll. Lovely. Right, it's time now for Supplement Sunday, the part of the show where my panel and I look at some of the stories hitting the headlines. Joining me, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan. We should put the world to rights. They just need us, that's it. Yeah. Right, who's going to go first?
OK, this
Danny,
is from today's Mail. Donald Trump will unleash all-out war on Keir Starmer if he wins the US presidential race. There's a source in the Trump camp. There's always a source with Fleet Street stories. A source told the Mail on Sunday, do not underestimate the damage Starmer has done to relations with the US. The Trump team are ready and waiting to unleash all-out war on him because he is perceived as anti-American and a whinging liberal bore. Now, I don't know whether he's anti-American, but the rest of that sentence and the sentiment I can agree with. And don't forget who is our Foreign Secretary.
Oh, David Lammy.
David Lammy,
yeah.
Who has said before Trump is a racist, KKK and Nazi sympathiser. That is so myopic.
That's so offensive.
Exactly.
That's before he was a minister, I think.
Well,
yes,
so
that's right. He was on the back benches.
Yeah.
But this is when it all kicked off saying, should he be allowed to visit Parliament? Yeah. But that is so myopic. If you look back then, and now he's the Foreign Secretary.
But I can't believe that you said, oh, but that was before he was a minister, as if that's any excuse or justification for those words.
Yeah,
he was still an MP, he was still in Parliament. And anyway, if I was to use those words, I would never call somebody that. So it's just common decency. And also, there's absolutely no truth in that. There's no truth in it. He's not a Nazi supremacist KKK. It's not true.
The only thing I say about Trump is pretty clear. Is what his behaviour on the last election was unacceptable.
Well, in your view.
Yes, I'm allowed my view.
I'm just saying in your view.
But it's unacceptable. The 6th of January stuff was completely and utterly unacceptable. And I just feel that he has gone too far. I thought the best thing he's done in the whole campaign was to announce that he will retire if he's not elected. And I think that's a great movement for the US. I genuinely think the US needs to get beyond both both him and Trump. You know, let's just
so we'll
move
have
on.
Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, who's pretty much.
Well, Joe Biden's retiring
but
as
the
well.
fact that he was even there for that long is utter madness. What have you got, Ivor? What's your supplement?
Well, I think ahead of what Israel can do, and in particular, I think that one of Israel's main problems has been the fact that Netanyahu has a sort of freedom as Prime Minister. I hope that in the next few months or whenever it's possible that Israel can get to a new Prime Minister and someone who is more available to actually talk about the things like a two-state solution.
He was talking about it at the beginning, but then the others didn't really want to partake in it.
Netanyahu has constantly said, I don't believe in a two-state solution.
Right. So
even though we, and I say the Labour Party, in 1997, going back to that point, Danny, we put forward that as the first time that happened. Sorry.
Okay, that's great. But the bottom line is this. Hamas don't want a two-state solution, right? So all these people, Israel, none of these people that you're talking about, all these proxies for Iran, none of them want a two-state solution either. They don't. In fact, the one on their manifesto, I know it was the one before the one now, was saying that you want to annihilate all the Jewish people. So whilst I accept you don't think Benjamin Netanyahu is very good or whatever, they're all. I think they're all terrible. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is doing the best he can for his people, but even if he agreed to it, the others won't. So I don't see where we go with this. But listen, lots of you been getting in touch. Grumpy Grandad said, we lost thousands on the question of reparations. We lost thousands of sailors at the end fighting at the end of slavery, and we even went as far as paying slave owners per slave to release them. It's only in recent times we stopped paying for this. We've paid enough. I agree with you. Right, well, listen, on today's show, I've been asking, do you have faith in Rachel Reeves not to do a Liz Truss? And the results are an incredible 96% of you say no, you do not have faith that she won't do a Liz Truss, and only 4% of you say yes. Well, good luck on Wednesday then to Rachel Reeves. I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel, journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And also former Labour Minister Ivor Kaplan for joining me today. Ivor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As ever, a huge thank you to you at home for your company. It's been a blast. I'll see you tomorrow morning, actually, because I'm joining Eamon for breakfast. I'll be doing breakfast on Monday and Tuesday. But I'll leave you with the weather on the way next. What have we got coming up next? You'll have to wait and see.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. After a largely fine day across the south, it will be turning dull for all of us on Monday. Higher pressure then building into the new week, but it does leave a lot of cloud. Looking at the bigger picture, we've got this frontal system moving its way south and eastwards, introducing a lot of cloud and rain tonight and into Monday. So heavy spells of rain across much of Scotland and northern England. That will sink its way southwards, affecting the Midlands, and then later on towards the southeast of England. Otherwise, with a lot of cloud around, it will be mild tonight. Temperatures actually holding up at around 12 to 14 degrees to start Monday morning. So a mild start out there, but a dull start to the new working week. So across much of Scotland, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain and drizzle, but there may be some glimmers of sunshine towards the far north and east. Northern Ireland, again, a mild start here, 13 or 14 degrees to start Monday morning, but cloud and outbreaks of rain. That persisting across much of Wales, perhaps a little bit heavy on the hills, but otherwise some brightness may just develop towards the southwest of England through the morning. But otherwise, it is going to be quite a dull and grey day out there. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle on and off through the day. We may see some sunshine across the south east into the afternoon and perhaps